Hello, Wool Shift Us listeners. Elysia here. Please come on inside. Go ahead and shut the door behind you. Don't let the snow in. And come curl up by the fire. For Luke and I have a tale to tell you, a tale of despair, of hope and redemption, a tale of ghostly spirits, the cruelty of man, and finding the inner spark that allows you to spread spots of brightness in a sometimes dark world. We're talking, of course, about A Christmas Carol. Luke, excited to talk about the 9 classics, 4 shorts, 5 feature films that we've got on the docket for today.
And a partridge in a pear tree. Yeah, I am, and this is a very thorough list that you've come up with, Elysia. But I've really enjoyed watching all this content because some of these films are on a hard rotation. I watch them every year. Some, like the Alice the Sim 1951 version, I haven't watched in a very long time. Ditto the 1984 George C. Scott version, and those two had actually got kind of merged together in my head. So it was
Yeah,
actually
to be
kind of
honest, same. But
yeah,
yeah, I know you and I are going to differentiate hard on them today.
yeah. So it was an interesting experience to kind of disaggregate those two films. But yeah,
Mm.
I've really enjoyed it. And by the way, it's a great night to be recording A Christmas Carol because it's absolutely pelting it down with rain here
Oh,
in
yeah.
Scotland. It's blowing a gale.
In Amsterdam, too.
It really is a night for ghost stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so the topic was your idea, and of course, we talked about that more in the intro episode. But now I feel like I've given you Christmas homework, so I hope, hope you're
No,
enjoying it.
no, thank you very, very much, Elysia.
Well, okay, so the intro episode that I mentioned, you can find that in this feed, and we already laid out everything we're going to be covering in the series. But here's what we're discussing today. Today, we're discussing the classic adaptations, or at least a large handful of the classic adaptations of A Christmas Carol. So that includes 2 early shorts, like the very first. So the 1901 Scrooge, which is only 6 minutes long. You can pause right now and watch it. You'll find that link in the show notes. Ditto for the 1910 A Christmas Carol, which is only 13 minutes long. Then we're going to talk about 3 of the most classics. So Luke just alluded to 2 of them. A Christmas Carol from 1951, starring Alistair Sim. A Christmas Carol from 1984, starring George C. Scott. And A Christmas Carol from 1999, starring Patrick Stewart. And we're going to talk also about like the first major musical version, the 1970 version, Scrooge, starring Albert Finney. And then we're going to round it out with some talk of some of the classic animated/children's versions. So there's the Oscar-winning 25-minute long 1971 short A Christmas Carol, and which actually stars Alistair Sim, and they have Marley from the 51 version back for that as well. So nice
Yeah.
callback. And we're going to talk about, of course, don't worry, The Muppet Christmas Carol from 1992, and also one last short, Mickey's Christmas Carol from 1983, which is only 26 minutes, which is my personal favorite. So yeah, you'll find links in the show notes where you can watch all of them, or yeah, I think all of them are available. 2 of them require a Disney Plus subscription. Before we start breaking them down, Luke, do you have overall favorites, least favorites you want to shout out up front?
Okay. My favorite is very predictable. I talked about it in the preview episode. It's just a film that is tied up inexorably with Christmas for me, and that's the Muppets Christmas Carol. And
Mm-hmm.
it's almost not fair to judge that as a movie because it's just become like so much. It was how I was, like I said in the intro episode, it was how I was introduced to the story. Yeah, so that's definitely my favorite. My least favorite, I think, is the 1984 version for
Mm.
reasons we'll get into. It's not
Mm-hmm.
bad, it's not terrible, it's just not all that good.
Yeah. I'm on board with you, I guess, with the least favorite because yeah, it was just I also like I went in really excited for that one, and then it was just kind of like, oh wait, this isn't as good as I remember it.
Yeah, and a lot of that is because stuff you thought was in that one was actually in
Right.
the 19. It was actually in the
51 version.
1951 one. Yeah.
And so, yeah, the 1951 one was like my covert favorite that like snuck up and bit me in the favorite butt. But I mean, there's always I have a soft spot for Mickey. That's like I feel the way about Mickey the way you feel about the Muppet Christmas Carol. So,
Okay.
what's your version of the 1951? What's your like second favorite after
My
Muppets?
second favorite is actually a bit of a controversial one. I'm going for the 1999 Patrick Stewart one.
Is that
Uh,
controversial?
well, it's not. It's. I don't think it's considered like one of the classic adaptations
I think
of
so.
A
That's why
Christmas
it's on the
Carol.
list.
Okay. Um, but yeah, I mean, Patrick Stewart is a really good Scrooge. The film emerged out of one man show he was
Right.
doing. He was doing like readings, doing like the proper Dickensian
Mhm.
readings of A Christmas Carol. And that's where that came from. So he does a really good version of Scrooge at like every stage of his transformation and like OG unredeemed Scrooge
Right.
as well. And also like so many versions of A Christmas Carol get rid of the bit with the miners
Yeah.
and the guys on the ship, and that does that particular scene the
Mhm.
best of all of them. And also, anytime you throw in Silent Night into a Christmas movie,
Mhm.
you're gonna hit me straight in the feels.
Yeah, they give you a
Like,
whole montage, so yeah,
yeah,
that is a strong point of that. I like that one too. I do like that one.
yeah.
Yeah. And also apparently that one other than obviously the one man show, its biggest influence that they cite is the 1951 version, my favorite. So see, they're kindred spirits.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as far as spoilers go, I mean, it seems silly to give out any sort of spoiler warning, especially for this episode. Maybe when we talk
It's a
about the
Christmas
twists.
Carol, people.
You know how the story goes. If you want to know how the book version of the story goes in detail, that we covered in the book club. So that's for the Supercast and Patreon subscribers. You can find those links in the show notes, and we'll talk more about it at the end. Um, but for this episode, yeah, we are talking about the classics, the ones that we've handpicked for this year. I think we've already pretty much decided we're doing this again next year, if not the year after as well.
There are so many adaptations of
I know.
of a Christmas Carol. It's untrue.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. So for this episode with the classics, what we're gonna do is I listed them out in little groupings, and we're gonna talk about them first in those little groupings, give a little backstory on the films, what's special and notable about each of them, and then we're going to go into the Christmas pit of hell to go. We're gonna pit them head to head against each other and talk about like who is the best Scrooge and following the layout of the novel, we're going to go through one stave at a time. And so for those of you who didn't get to listen to the novella episode, the novella is divided into five staves, and basically he called the chapter staves because it's a Christmas carol, it's a musical, it's a song, so that's why it's laid out that way. We talk more about the musical references in the novella in the book club episode, so you can learn more about that there, but that's also why you'll notice that each of these episodes in this series has some sort of musical reference in the name. And then there's going to be two more episodes coming your way after this one. There'll be a mini episode focused on Dickens, which we're going to compare to The Man Who Invented Christmas 2017 movie, which is a loose telling of his creation of this novel.
A lot of
Loose.
emphasis on the loose there.
Yeah. So that'll be a short, quick, light episode, but just to give you a little framework. And then, yeah, we're going to have another full episode like this covering some of the most popular twists on the tale. And we'll talk more about that and exactly what we'll be covering in that episode at the end. And of course, we talked about it in the intro episode as well. All right. So to get into our chosen classics, the first films. Can I ask before we get into this, Luke? I'm one of those weirdos who regularly watches movies from 1900 or something. But I take it this is less your cup of tea in general. So I appreciate you going along on this journey with me.
Now, I found it really interesting, actually.
Yeah.
and it's really interesting how quickly cinema develops both as a technology and as a storytelling medium. So there's actually quite a big difference in like how sophisticated the 1901 version is
Mhm.
versus the 1910 version. And we
Yeah.
could have had a version from 1938 as well, which would have been the first
Yeah.
tour.
Well, no, that's definitely on the list for next year.
Yeah,
That
which
and 35. Yeah.
which would have been the first two talkie versions
Mhm.
of A Christmas Carol. But I mean, the first one, the 1901 one, isn't a complete story.
No, it's part of it's lost.
It's only 6 minutes, and it does seem to all take place inside Scrooge's chambers. Like they only seem to have the one
Right.
set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, yeah, the cameras had to be planted in place. And one of like the coolest innovations where they would have like studios that would actually rotate around to capture the best light. Like there was the Black Maria was Edison Studios, one of the major actually Edison was a studio behind the 1910 version.
Oh,
But
yeah, it was. That's really cool though.
yeah.
I did not
So
know that.
So yeah, so the very first film adaptation was this 1901 version titled simply Scrooge, aka it's sometimes called Marley's Ghost, and this came out only 58 years after the book was published, but of course a bunch of stage adaptations and readings and all that had been going on before this. But this is the first time it was put on this new developing technology, so they had to figure out the limitations of this new medium.
Yeah.
So just for context, for 1901 is when this film came out. The oldest film ever is 1895. So this is only 6 years after films had just been started to be made. And the oldest surviving film actually comes from 1888, and that's the Rondé Garden scene by Louis Le Prince. The older one, by the way, is Workers Leaving the Lumiere Factory from the Lumiere brothers, who anyone, if you know about film, they're one of the pioneers. Um, and to 1 year after this film was the famous A Trip to the Moon, Georges Méliès film, which is considered the first sci-fi film. Are you familiar with that one?
Yes, I've seen that.
Yeah.
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 So this is really like at the very beginning. This is one of the ones that's first figuring out the special effects. And it's such a shame that people weren't preserving these films better
Yeah, it is. And I've got to say, if you didn't know the story, if you hadn't read A Christmas Carol, it would have been pretty hard
to
to
follow.
work out what was going on.
Yeah. Well, so apparently this film was another historical moment for it. It was the first use of intertitles, so the titles that appear between the films, but the version that we've seen doesn't have them.
Oh, okay. So that would have made it easier to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Mhm. But yeah, so this one, because it's only 6 minutes long, and they it used to only be 3.5 minutes, and then they found more of it. So we've doubled the length. But now it ends with Scrooge just falling into a grave, and then so it's kind of like a sad ending.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
no redemption.
Yeah. No redemption for you. You're dead.
Yeah. Not that Scrooge. So by the way, that Scrooge is played by Daniel Smith. I can't find any other credit to his name than this. But the director was Walter R. Booth, and he was a British magician and early film pioneer. He was famous for quote unquote trick films that led to the first animated film. So his other most famous film is The Hand of the Artist. That's considered the first animated film from 1906. And yeah, he had been making films for 2 years by this point when he made this. And he worked with producer slash writer Robert W. Paul, who was another legendary, even more legendary film pioneer from England. And he invented also a lot of technical side. So he had some innovations with portable cameras, and he also built something called the cinematograph camera number 1 in 1896, and this was the first camera to feature a reverse cranking, which allowed for the same film footage to be exposed more than once. And so they were able to superimpose multiple images in one film. And the first film this was used on was this one, the
Oh, for the
uh
ghosts.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is cutting edge film technology on display, what's left of it.
Yeah.
And he said he actually based it as much on the popular stage adaptation of the time as the original one. The stage adaptation was done by J.C. Buckstone.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
So basically, what they did is they had, and we'll see this pop up. I know you watched the It's Christmas Carol, which I haven't seen yet, but there's this convention that sometimes is used in some of the adaptations where they use one ghost for
Yes.
yeah, instead of like the multiple ghosts, and that comes from that stage adaptation, basically.
Okay.
And yeah, they just basically use Marley throughout, which makes sense, to deepen the relationship with that one spiritual entity, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you have any general thoughts on this one?
So I thought it was really interesting comparing this one to the 1910 one, just to see how far the technology had advanced in like a little
Mm-hmm.
less than a decade. So this one, the 1910 one, does have the intercards, the
Mm-hmm.
text, and it
And
also
music. Yeah, which is
music,
arbitrary.
the
Yeah.
music, and it does have this really cool thing where like they change the filters depending
Mm-hmm.
on whether it's the ghost, like the spirit world, or the actual world. So the actual
Yeah.
world is in like a brown
Mm-hmm.
filter, and like when the spirits show up, it goes into a blue
Yeah.
filter, which I thought was actually
Okay.
a really cool effect.
Yeah, no, so yeah, that's a 1910 one. Just
Yeah,
before we get into that, just to round out this one, just in comparison, yeah, the 1910 one does, it is interesting to put them side by side because the 1910 one, then you're like, oh, I see what the other one was doing, but you did it better because
yeah,
even though it's only 9 years later.
yeah, and it's
um,
a more complete
yeah,
telling of the story as well.
yeah, they have more time and the whole film's there. But yeah, the first one, the 1901 one is, it's like fuzzy and silent. And of course, they're like limited by necessities, very few sets. The visions are all that picture within picture thing, and the denouement's cut off. But it was cutting edge special effects for the time. I just want to point out there was the second ever film adaptation was actually done in 1908 called A Christmas Carol, and that was actually the first American adaptation. It was filmed in Chicago by it was starring the British American early actor Tom Ricketts, but that version is considered lost. However, just to point out why we are missing out, the Moving Picture World magazine, which was the premier magazine of early filmmaking, says it is impossible to praise this film too highly. It reproduces the story as closely as it is possible to do in a film, and the technical excellence of the work cannot be questioned. The photography, the staging, and the acting are all of the best, and the story told is always impressive. Such films cannot be too highly commended. They are a welcome relief from the riot of bloodshed which has marred the moving picture shows of New York and other cities for far too long. I'm like, it's 1908. How long has
Yeah, the more
you
things change, the more things change, the more they stay the
exactly.
same.
Even though it costs a fortune almost to prepare such a film, it is quite likely that the public will patronize it sufficiently to make good the extraordinary outlay. Like, yeah.
Yeah, like nothing changes about the film industry.
No. It's just funny. Like, I've watched these early films. Like, please show me. I'm just out of curious. Where's the riot of bloodshed?
Yeah, where's the bloodshed?
But anyway, yeah. So the A Christmas Carol 1910, that is the first surviving complete film adaptation, 13 minutes, American made, directed by J. Cyril Dawley, who was a former stage actor and prolific filmmaker of the silent era, produced by Edison Studios in the Bronx, as we talked about, and Scrooge was played by Mark McDermott, who is an Irish Australian American prolific stage and screen actor. And also of note, Cratchit was played by Charles Stanton Ogle, who's best known as the original Frankenstein's monster in 1910 and Long John Silver in 1920. I've watched that 1910 Frankenstein, and it's different. Which
Okay.
is, yeah, I like it. I like it. I always have the picture of him. He just looks so different than you picture Frankenstein, and he's more like a shaggy swamp guy.
Okay, interesting.
Hmm. So, okay, so you liked this one, you said more for the different, they use the color filters and
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, it's nothing against the 1901 one,
no,
but
no, no.
it's just a complete version of the story. It is like, it's almost beginning to end adaptation of And A Christmas Carol, and having the cards, the text does make it
Mhm.
easier to follow where we
Mhm.
are in the story. And I love the physicality of the acting. There's a lot of pointing, and like all the acting is very big gestures because it has to
Mhm.
be like really broad to get the point across.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we see like they're obviously it's iterations of the same special effects they were using 9 years earlier, but they've gotten more advanced now and they're much cleaner and crisper. The one weird thing was that like the framing, it I guess because they couldn't really move the camera, sometimes the framing would be cut off weirdly, like you're watching like half of a dinner scene. Like what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's like they really hadn't quite worked out the blocking of it, like
Right.
where to put everybody so everybody
Yeah.
was in shot. Yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, and of course they have to really simplify the story because you only get some title cards to clue you in. And as you said, they have to use a lot of gestures.
yeah, a lot of pointing and a lot
Right.
of open mouthed horror.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it can't compare to what comes later, but it's really interesting to see where it comes from. And I noticed they use the blue specifically for the ghost scenes. And it's really faithful, but like super simplified.
And wouldn't you just love to get a time machine and go back and watch that in a cinema with an audience? I'd love to know what the audience reaction to that
Yeah.
was, because like you look at it and think, oh, this is interesting, but it's really basic. But you
Hmm.
make the point that it's absolutely cutting edge technology for its time. So like I've always wondered with like a trip to the moon, like if I ever had a time machine, like I'd want to go back and watch that in a cinema with an
Right.
audience to see what people's reaction would be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, even those like train ones, just to see them, the train coming at you and like,
Yeah,
whoa.
yeah, yeah.
It's like in Silo when they see Juliet watching the video of George and they're like, whoa, it's like he's in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And also I just want to point out that I think so in the novella, Scrooge does not take the turkey and stuff to the Cratchits himself at the end.
No.
In this version, he does. So I guess in a lot of versions after this, that happens too. So I guess this could be the first one that started that,
Yeah, that
unless,
started that particular twist
hmm
on the story. Yeah.
yeah, maybe,
Yeah, quite possibly.
yeah. All right. Any last thoughts on the first of
Nope.
the films? Okay.
Nope.
Well, that's a good time to take a quick break, and then we're gonna be back and we're gonna talk about the main classics. All right. See you in a sec. Okay. So let's start with clearly the best. Better
Certainly the
than
best live
all
act,
the rest. Yeah,
but
it's the
certainly
best.
the best live action one.
Well, okay, but you said 99, yeah, which is fair too.
Yeah.
Um, but okay, Scrooge, 1951, directed by Brian Desmond Hurst, who also produced, and he is a filmmaker from Belfast. He's got 30 credits to his name, but this is by far his most famous. And the writer was Noel Langley, who's a South African American novelist, playwright, screenwriter, director. He happens to be one of the three screenwriters, for example, credited for The Wizard of Oz,
Oh,
1939.
oh, cool.
Yeah. Scrooge in this version, iconically played by Alistair Sims, a Scottish theatre actor who appeared in more than 50 films, but he's best known for this for sure. And normally I'm not going to call out the Marleys, but in this case, you and I both agreed this Marley deserves
Yeah, the
attention.
Marley is Jacob Marley in this film. He is just giving it his all. He's got his big acting hat on. I mean, that is like proper Shakespearean. I am emoting. I am hitting the back of the wall.
Oh no, he made it big. He brought it home, and it is English Shakespearean theater actor Michael Hordern, Michael Hordern.
Yeah, it's just like he completely steals the entire movie, and he's only in it for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I love that dramatic pitch.
Yeah.
So, Luke, what are your overall thoughts in this film?
I really liked it. I thought it makes some interesting choices in terms of what it adds to, because in some ways it sticks very close to the novel. There are
Mhm.
there are a lot of lines of dialogue that are lifted clean from the novel, but what
Yeah.
it adds is really interesting. So you see more of the relationship between
Mhm.
Scrooge and Marley when they were alive.
Right.
You see them meeting, for example, and
Mhm.
you see them as business partners committing what has to be said is a pretty blatant piece of banking fraud. Um, and yeah, there's also it's a very short scene, but it's when Scrooge is on his way home and he stops at the inn for dinner,
Mhm.
and he asks the waiter for more bread, and the waiter goes, "That'll be an extra halfpenny." Um, and Scrooge goes, "No more bread." And like I don't know like quite how pre-decimal currency work, but I do know that a halfpenny is like the smallest
Right.
unit of currency you could get. So that's just a brilliant little vignette of just
Uh-huh.
how tight-fisted Scrooge
Right.
is, that he will deny himself the small pleasure of a bit more bread to
Mhm.
save a halfpenny. And like
Right.
it's over in less than a minute. But it's a really good little illustrative bit of just how money loving Scrooge is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I like about it is also so that is actually one of the because he does in the novella he does stop by a tavern on the way home and that's almost never represented on film. So that is does show why this is a remarkably faithful film, but also at the same time it's very much like it realizes it's an adaptation and it adapts. And as you said, like it adds not just more backstory with Marley, but also like even well, more backstory to the love story, more even the people at the end who have his belongings, you know, who steal his belongings and sell them. They are seated in throughout the movie.
Yeah, because the like two of them are working as like domestic staff
Mm-hmm.
for Scrooge, and actually that makes that whole scene in the pawnbrokers much more affecting in a way,
Right.
because
Exactly.
these aren't three random people. These are
Right.
people that actually took care of Scrooge or managed his household. The other thing, from a British point of view, is young Scrooge is played by George Cole,
Mm-hmm.
who is it's really weird seeing George Cole as a young man, because if you're British, you'll know George Cole as an old man in the sitcom Minder, which is like a he's playing like for an American audience, he's playing like an Archie Bunker
Okay.
type character in Minder. But it's
Mm-hmm.
really weird to see George Cole as a young man. It's very weird. And the other person that's a bit weird to see is Hattie Jakes, who
Hmm.
plays Belle, and she goes on to be a comedic actress in the Carry On movies
Okay.
in the 60s and 70s.
Okay. Okay. Well, so I'm surprised that this apparently had a mixed reception at first. It was a box office hit in the US. It was a flop. Sorry, a box office hit in the UK. It was a flop in the US. And Variety called the film a grim thing that will give tender-aged kiddies viewing it the screaming meanies, and adults will find it long, dull, and greatly overdone. Like, damn.
I can see where they're coming with the greatly overdone. There is a lot of like Shakespearean, not so much by Lester
Sign
Sim,
me
but
up.
by
Yeah.
a lot of the supporting cast is very
Hmm.
stall. It's very sort of I've got my big acting hat on and I'm going to act.
So you think that's why it did better in the UK than the US?
I think the audience might have been a bit more used to it.
Yeah.
Also, I think for 1951 is an interesting time in like British history, and particularly the history of British cinema, because it's just emerging from Second World War. Rationing is still a thing,
Mhm.
and Christmas Christmas in the UK during the Second World War and the immediate post-war period, like rationing was slightly eased at Christmas.
Mhm.
Rationing was a bit more generous, and also rationing applied to the film industry as well. So there weren't actually all that many films getting made
Mhm.
in the UK. To actually get the film to make a feature film was quite a long, laborious process. So I think also it may have been due to lack of choice as well, frankly.
Mhm.
There were
Mhm.
fewer films in the cinema, in the UK at the time than there would have been in the US.
Yeah. Yeah, well, now it's considered a classic. A lot of people call it like the classic. They think it's the best version, but it was definitely it was airing on TV that did it. You know,
Yeah,
that made it.
definitely.
Yeah, brought it into people's homes. But the director has always been like super proud of it. He's always been showing it off. Apparently, yeah, the one downside I would say to this one is that the ghosts are less tragic, which I don't that sounds like a weird downside, but there's no mention of Marley having to always wander or the ghost of Christmas Present only living for one 12-day night.
Yeah. Although it does do a very good representation of Marley showing Scrooge all the other ghosts and them
Mhm.
being chained together. That was really well done for a film in 1950.
Yeah, no, all of the creepy ghosty scenes were great. This
Yeah.
is one of like the scarier versions, which I say is a good thing.
Yes, it is. And
Yeah.
also, like Alistair Sim really does sell like terror. You really do
Mhm.
believe he's a man in fear of his life.
Ah, he was made for this role.
He
Brilliant.
was.
All right. So next we move on to one. I'm sorry, dear listener, if this one is your favorite. It is not mine, Luke's favorite. We won't linger on it too long. But and there are plus sides which I'll bring up when we get into breaking down the different staves. But it's a Christmas Carol from 1984. This is the George C. Scott version. The director was Clive Donner, who was an editor, actually, of the 1951 Scrooge we just talked about. He was a British New Wave director who also did, by the way, Oliver Twist in 1982, 2 years earlier. So he was definitely in his like classics and Christmas era during this time. The writer was Roger O. Hearson. He was an American dramatist and screenwriter. He was best known for his books of Broadway musicals and also for Pippin. He was nominated for a Tony Award for that one, and also a film called Walking Happy that I'm not familiar with, but apparently that's his most famous one. You don't know it, do you? Walking
No.
Happy? No. For some reason, I always thought this one was made by the BBC, but it was not.
No, it is it was, as I understand it, shown on the BBC a lot
Hmm.
in the 80s and early 90s.
That must be why I think so.
I don't remember seeing it on television. I know I'd seen it before I watched it for this show, but I I can't remember where or under what
Yeah.
circumstances.
I feel like I watched it in class in school, actually.
Okay.
But it was a theatrical release in the UK and it was released on CBS in the US. Um, Luke, go ahead. What are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, I it's not bad. It's not if you listen to
All A Christmas Carol is good, A Christmas Carol.
yeah, I was gonna say you can't really go too. Well, I was gonna say you can't really go too wrong with the Christmas Carol, but then I watched Scrooge today, and boy, can you? Um, but yeah, this is not bad. If you listen to our Christmas special last year, this is not Clarence.
Hmm.
This is not that
I
level of
loved Clarence. It was so bad it was good again, but
bad.
no.
But I think the thing about this film is it's just miscast. Like
Hmm.
George C. Scott is a fine actor, but
Hmm.
he's not Ebenezer Scrooge. There is just something about it's hard to know what it is, but there's something about his performance that's just a little bit off. And the same with David Warner as Bob Cratchit. Bob Cratchit's meant to be this very meek, very mild, very sort of retiring character. And David Warner, great character actor, loved him in Star Trek Five, loved him in Star Trek Six. There's a there's a version of Jekyll and Hyde where he plays Hyde
Uh-huh.
that is excellent, but he is just not Bob Cratchit. He's just not. For a start, he's too bulky. He's too big. He's too
Okay.
much of a presence to fade into the background in the way
Hmm.
that Cratchit's kind of required to do. And there's one scene that kind of spoiled the entire film for me, and that's when Scrooge meets Tiny Tim is standing
Hmm.
outside the window of the counting house,
Hmm.
and Scrooge actually walks out and meets him.
Hmm.
He says something like, "What are you doing here?" And Tiny Tim goes, "Waiting for my father," and Scrooge goes, "That'll you'll be waiting a long time."
Mhm.
And the reason that that whole scene is misbegotten is the whole point of Scrooge is not that he's evil; it's that he's indifferent. He doesn't
Mhm.
know about Tiny Tim's existence. He doesn't
Mhm.
know about Cratchit's circumstances. That
Right.
whole scene makes it look well. No, it doesn't make it look. It shows you that Scrooge is aware
Mhm.
of Cratchit's struggles and that he just doesn't care about them.
Right.
And that to me is misunderstanding who Scrooge is and the lessons he learns.
Right.
Because Scrooge is not an evil guy; he's an indifferent guy.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I find him a charmless Scrooge, which maybe sounds weird to say, but Scrooge actually, like the Scrooges that we love, they have a charm, you know? They're grumpy, but you root for them because you see the goodness in them and obviously they come around. That's the whole point. Um it just seemed like in general it was the least charming version of pretty much all of the characters, and it just kind of felt like a more superficial version. Um but I did like the costumes. The costumes are good, very Victorian, very Victorian. The production design was great in general, you know, the settings, everything that all looked good. But overall, it didn't live up to my memories. It was rather stagey, like, and that's, you know, I don't mind something. This is ripe to, it should be recall a stage production to a certain degree because that's part of the pedigree of this story, absolutely, from the beginning. um but this was just not it was like the actors were just going through the motions without minding the emotional depths of the tale, and I just felt like the direction was lacking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's right. And the other thing I don't like about it, and I do think this is where you tell the wheat from the chaff when it comes
Uh-huh.
to Christmas Carol adaptations, is Scrooge should go on a journey with all four ghosts. His character should change subtly
Mhm.
throughout the film. It shouldn't get to Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, and all of a sudden, like that's when he has like a Damascene conversion to being a
Mhm.
good guy, because it shouldn't be about try. Scrooge's conversion shouldn't be about trying to avoid a bad death. It
Mhm.
should be about living. It should be about living a good life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does feel like this one puts like a lot of weight for the redemption on the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. Like
Uh-huh.
he's arguing backwards and forwards with the Ghost of Christmas Past and the Ghost of Christmas
Uh-huh.
Present. He's actually trying to engage them in a dialogue about why he's right and they're wrong.
Mm.
And then when it gets to the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, that's when you get the turn into he's going to change, and that to me is the wrong way of looking at it. The change should come gradually over the entire course
Yeah.
of the evening.
There are some positives that I have, but I'm gonna save them for where we're talking about the staves
Yeah,
side by side. But for now, let's move on to one that you and I both liked a lot better. So yeah, apologies to the 1984 fans. I will say some nice things about it, I
yeah,
promise.
well,
But for now,
yeah. There are good things in there.
yeah. But for now, one that we are more positive on, the 1999 A Christmas Carol, directed by David Jones, who's an English director, especially of theater. And it was written by Peter Barnes. He is an Olivier Award winning playwright and screenwriter. He's best known for the play The Ruling Class, which was made into a 1972 film, which Peter O'Toole received an Oscar nomination for. And this Christmas Carol was one of his last productions. Scrooge in this one is iconically Patrick Stewart. And I want to call out that Bob Cratchit is played by Richard E. Grant, who I also adore. By the way, did you watch the franchise on
Did I watch?
HBO? Oh, you might,
No.
yeah, you might enjoy that one. It's like a parody of the like making
Okay.
Marvel films, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, this was actually filmed for TV for TNT. Although I have to point out it's technically a Hallmark production.
Yeah. It's weird. It's in that brief window of time because I go down a Hallmark rabbit hole every Christmas. I find Hallmark to be endlessly fascinating as like a production company. There's a brief window of time at the end of the 90s, beginning of the noughties, where Hallmark decide they want to make TV, but
Uh-huh.
they haven't settled on the Hallmark formula yet.
Mm.
So you get these kind of a lot of them
More,
are
yeah.
sort of classic tales
Mhm.
adapted, but you do get this kind of much broader palette
Mhm.
of made for TV movies where they're clearly trying to find their métier. They're clearly trying to
Right.
find the formula, but they haven't quite got there yet.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and as you mentioned, this happened because of the success of those one-man shows that Patrick Stewart was putting on in London and on Broadway of this story. So that basically made it happen. And then they cited the 1951 film, the Alistair Sim film, as a primary inspiration. So, Luke, why do you like this version so much?
I just I mean, it's a good version all the way through, but when we're
Hmm.
doing the comparison, I think this has the best version of Christmas, a Christmas present
Okay.
of that stave. I think it has the best version of that in any of the adaptations
Okay.
we look at. It really does get that sense
There's some
of
strong contenders for that one.
yeah,
That's one of my favorite ghosts.
it really does get that sense of excitement and Christmas
Hmm.
morning, and like the way it does the Cratchits
Hmm.
Christmas is really really good, and the way it goes to nephew Fred's Christmas that's really well staged. It looks incredibly inviting. They do the thing with the poker and
Hmm.
the mulled wine and sticking the poker in, and
Mhm.
yeah, there's a very Fred, um, Fred, Sc- uh, Fred Scrooge is played by a very very young Dominic West,
Mhm.
as well, which is
Yeah, true. Good
one of the
point.
earliest roles I've seen. Man,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, this is a super faithful
it
adaptation.
is.
Although sometimes it does make it feel like it's speed running through the book plot, but it does also like pause and take the time to add extra poignancy and depth to certain moments. The casting is obviously really good. My great love is still the 1951 version, but I really like how this one leads into the funny asides from the novella, which you and I talked about in our novella episode.
Yeah,
Um,
it even
yeah.
does. It even has Marley's funeral, and it even
Mhm.
has the dead as a doornail.
Right,
It even
exactly.
has the whole dead as a doornail sort of
Right.
skit.
Yeah.
That's how loyal it is to the
Yeah.
novella.
But it's funny, you can watch it on YouTube. There's a link in the show notes, but it has commercial breaks built in. Like it's one of the more quality versions, but it was made for TV. And
Yeah, and
yeah.
what I find really amazing about Patrick Stewart's performance is Patrick Stewart, obviously at that point in his career, is really recognizable as
Mhm.
Professor X, as Jean Luc
Right.
Picard, but you never once,
No. Think about that.
no, you never once think about that.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think of the special effects in this one?
They're not its strongest point. They're not its strongest
I
suit.
mean, they look a little dated, but they're kind of charming in that way.
They
It
are.
adds charm. It places it at a moment.
If you hit me with like a big choral version of Silent Night, you're gonna hit me straight in the feels. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that just the whole scene with the miners and the sailors and yeah, just got me right there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Well, we'll come back and talk about this more when we pit them all head to head. But switching gears, we're going to talk about what many people consider the OG musical. There actually is an older one, but it was considered lost and has been mostly found. That's definitely on the list for next year too. But this year, we're talking about Scrooge from 1970, starring Albert Finney, who, AKA Daddy Warbucks, for any other Annie fans out there. This one was directed by Ronald Neame, and He is best known. Oh yeah, he got an Academy Award nomination for special effects for his British war film in 1943, One of Our Aircraft, and he also produced Great Expectations and Oliver Twist. Like, he was super big in the 40s. This is 1970. He's received several Academy Award nominations for writing, but he shifted toward directing, and this is kind of toward the end of the height of his career. The writer was Leslie Bricusse, who's known especially for musicals and music and lyrics across films, like especially you might know a little film called Willy Wonka.
Oh yes. Oh
or
yes.
certain or certain songs from James Bond films. And the score was arranged and conducted by Ian Fraser. And the posters, I love this. The posters for Scrooge included the tagline, "What the Dickens have they done to Scrooge?" Because people hate musicals. That's still a thing. They think they hate musicals and then they love them. It was a modest financial success, though, and the reviews, they leaned positive. And Finney won the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in a Musical and Comedy in 1971. And the film received 4 Academy Award nominations, including Best Original Song for Thank You Very Much. Sorry for anyone who has that in your head. You're welcome. But also for score, costume design, and art direction. So, Luke, what were your overall thoughts on this one?
I enjoyed the heck out of this. Um, by the way, I've got thank you very much. Thank you
Thank
very
you very
much.
much.
That's the nicest thing that anybody's ever. That has been grinding through my head for 3 days solid now. I may need surgery to get that thing removed.
Worthy Academy Award nominee.
Absolutely. Um, and I'm not surprised that it got nominated for cinematography because the street scenes when they're walking through Camden Town and all the
Hmm.
shops and stalls, it all looks really colourful and inviting.
Hmm.
Um, and again, very strong Cratchit,
Hmm.
like the Cratchit, like the entire family Cratchit in this. Um, I do have a couple of niggles. I
Okay.
I actually don't like Albert Finney's performance
Oh.
very much.
Hmm.
I think he sort of plays Scrooge as he almost goes a bit too far. He kind of plays him as a bit of a hobgoblin
Hmm.
type of figure. And also, I don't know whether this is deliberate or whether it's just Finney's singing voice. But when he's singing the songs, he's got a really unpleasant
Well,
singing voice.
one of my notes in here is that movie doesn't care if some of the cast can't sing. Most
Yeah,
of the musicals numbers are subdued anyway.
Albert Finney definitely can't. It's like Pierce Brosnan levels
Yeah. Well,
of
that's the
bad.
thing. On the musical side, it's like there is that one standout song, and then the other ones are just kind of. Couldn't tell you another song that's in the film right now. We're gonna watch for the twist. We're gonna watch one that's kind of a loose remake of this, so that might jog our heads a little bit. But I have a feeling at the end of it, we're still just gonna be singing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
By the way, the choreography for Thank You Very Much
Oh,
is
mwah.
brilliant as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is like they put everything into that one song.
Yeah. Like, this is it.
This is the
Well,
money shot. Yeah.
but the thing is, out of all the musicals that I've watched so far for this project, like, that is a song that's still stuck in my head. Like, I'm in the middle of Spirited right now, with my second rewatch, and
Okay.
there's some good songs in there, but none of them that I'm gonna be singing for, like, 2 weeks, like, "Thank you very
Yeah.
much."
And also, this is like where it gets quite far away from the novella. But the
Mhm.
scene where like Scrooge is given a guided tour of hell
Oh,
by
yeah. Oh,
Marley,
bravo.
yeah, just chef's kiss,
Yeah,
10 out of 10.
we're obviously gonna get back to talking about that, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's not really like one of the most faithful adaptations. It still is, when it comes to the twist, it's not in the twist realm. It's still definitely that story. But there's like a warmth and like a kind of it's a camp story, you know? I
Yeah.
read that quote in the novella episode from, the intro to the 1905 version of the novella where they're saying like Charles Dickens loves some high camp, bitch, basically. I'm paraphrasing,
Yeah,
but
he does. He does.
hmm and this is a camp story, but it has like warmth and silliness, and I yeah, it's kind of one of my favorites in this list. No.
Yeah. Also, Kenneth Moore as the Ghost of Christmas Present under some very, very, very heavy prosthetic
Mm,
makeup. If you didn't tell me that was Kenneth Moore, I wouldn't have found that out. And that is such a different role for him to play. Like growing up, Kenneth Moore was always the guy. He always played the hero in like Second World War films. So he was
yeah.
Douglas Bader. He was the commander out of Sink the Bismarck. He's got this classic sort of 40s, 50s film star looks. And by the 1970s, he kind of transitioned into doing television. But
hmm
like, if you'd ask me to name a character to play an avuncular giant, Kenneth Moore would have been the last person I would have picked for that role. And yet he does it perfectly fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, I have to read a quote from my letterbox review of this film. So, some of the changes are for the better, a better look at the heyday of Scrooge's great love. Some a bit confusing. Isabel's daughter is married to his nephew, or what? Some outright ludicrous. I'm pretty sure Scrooge's over the top generosity at the end bankrupted his business in a single day. But it all works somehow in this fuzzier, dancier alternative to Scrooge reality, and the Hell Sequence edition was an inspired choice.
But also, don't you just love the fact that in Thank You Very Much, Scrooge has completely got the right end of the stick? And yeah,
Yeah. What did you think of the animated opening title sequence?
I quite liked it. It was
Yeah.
different.
It was hand painted, and it was done by Ronald Searle, who is a famous British illustrator. And just to quote art of the title, they said, as is often the case with Searle's illustrations, the forms jump and squiggle into shape, the strokes loose and sprightly. In each scene, swaths of color and life pour out, while snowflakes dotting the brush strokes. The illustrations later appeared in the book Scrooge by Elaine Donaldson, published in 1970. So, yeah, it was a strong opening. I mean, I think, yeah, it holds a place in the cultural zeitgeist as like the first remembered musical, even if it wasn't technically the first musical version. The other songs are not so memorable. I do notice they make Scrooge more angry rather than indifferent to start. We're
Yes,
going to talk about that a lot. It was also very dramatic. It was a musical, but there's a lot of wire work for the actors, so I feel like they're feeling out like the extent of their technology.
I love the fact that to emphasize the point that Scrooge loves money, he literally goes to sleep with a little purse. He literally
Yeah.
goes to sleep with a little purse hanging
In
around
case
his
you missed
neck.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this one, yeah, it is beloved. So in 1992, they made a stage version called Scrooge the Musical. And as I said, next in the Twists episode, we're going to talk about a more recent remake, the 2022 Scrooge A Christmas Carol, which is an animated film on Netflix that is a loose remake of this, but adds some sci fi time travel
I've got
elements.
to say, I've been listening to the original cast recording of that 1992 stage play.
Mm,
And if let me put it this way: if I ever get a chance to see that on stage, I will definitely take it.
yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
would too. Yeah.
yeah,
Especially with a good cast. It would be a lot of fun.
yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts on this one before we go into?
No, except I will be singing "Thank You Very Much" from now to the day I die.
Thank you very much for the very fucking song.
Yeah, it's stuck in my cerebellum forever.
All right. So there's three films in this last version. I kind of lumped A Christmas Carol, the 1971 animated short, in here, but I'm not really sure that it's the most child friendly of the versions, to be honest. I guess it is. Like they don't even have alcohol in it. So I
No,
guess it's but it's an Oscar winner. It won Best Animated Short for its year. It's 25 minutes long. It was released on ABC in the US, and then later they released it theatrically because it was so popular. But then some industry people were like, oh, well, how can a film that was originally released on TV win an Oscar? It has to be released in a theater first. So they ended up changing the rules because of this and saying any film that was released on TV first is disqualified for an Oscar. Like, you snobby bitches.
Yeah.
Hmm.
By the way, like in the UK, this used to be on like hard repeat on the
Oh, yeah.
BBC when I was a kid. Like,
Okay.
and I think it had been for at least a previous generation, because if you look on the YouTube comments
Hmm.
underneath it, you have like tons of people going, "I remember this. This was on Christmas."
Yeah. Well, to be fair, it's probably well free to show. It's readily available on YouTube. You can find the link in the show notes.
Yeah, it was one of those things. You had this, and you had the Raymond Briggs Snowman
Hmm.
animated short as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, like actually sort of rewatching this is almost was I did rewatch it, but it was almost kind of pointless because I could tell you what happened in that beat for beat without having needed to watch it. Basically,
Do you consider it a scary adaptation?
it did scare me when I was a kid, but then again,
Hmm.
most things did.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I never watched it as a kid. This was my first time watching it, so yeah, I can see though where that comes from.
yeah,
So the director was Richard Williams. He was the animation director on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Maybe you've heard of that one. And he won 2 Academy Awards for that one, and obviously he won the Academy Award for this one. And the only writer credit on this one is Dickens. So they're basically saying like we are being super faithful.
well, you kind of are, but it's only 25 minutes long.
Exactly.
So
What are you going to do in 25 minutes?
yeah,
Um, but I should credit that the art style is a lot due to Ken Harris, who is credited as the master animator. And he's part of like, there's a whole cadre of Looney Tunes and WB alumni working on this film, and he's one of
yeah,
them. But most notably, they brought back Alistair Sim as Scrooge and Michael Hordern as Marley, aka, the two actors from the 1951 film. But they were totally different in this one, I thought.
yeah.
What do you think?
Well, let's put it this way: you can definitely tell that Alistair Sim was like 30 years older. This is much more an
Mm.
old man's
Mhm.
performance than the 1951 one. And yeah,
Mhm.
they'd clearly taken Michael Holden aside and told him, tone it down, tone it down.
No. I mean, you can see the directing's definitely different. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your overall thoughts on this one?
I mean, again, this is kind of like with the Muppets. I can't separate this from just a well of nostalgia and yeah, but it's a very good children's adaptation, I think,
Mhm.
of A Christmas Carol, because it does. A Christmas Carol it is a ghost story. It is meant to be.
Mhm.
It is meant to be scary. That particularly when Marley shows up, that is played.
Right.
That is played for horror. And I think in 25 minutes, um, it really does get to the it cuts a fair bit out, but it does get the essence of the story across
Yeah.
quite well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, I think it's surprisingly faithful given the short runtime. But yet the pacing always feels on point, despite the fact
Yeah.
it's so short. It doesn't feel rushed.
No, it
Um,
doesn't.
I love, obviously, like I said, that they brought back the Scrooge and Marley, my Scrooge and Marley, but it is like all of the characters' deliveries of the classic lines don't work as well for me as they did in the 1951 film, and I think it's because they were like told to be more subdued, basically.
Yes, definitely.
And I appreciate the animation style more than I personally love it. Although I appreciate or I love that they do add like the most book faithful touches. For instance, the Ghost of Christmas Past. We're going to talk about that when we get into the individual staves, but this is of the ones we're talking about this year. This is the most faithful Ghost of Christmas Past.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I can see why this won the animated short Oscar for sure. Just the animation in general lets them be very visually faithful. Um, yeah, it works for me.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this one?
No, like I say, it's like taking a warm bath in nostalgia. It's great.
Well, now that you've dipped your toe in the water, get ready to, cuddle into the bath
Yeah.
because we're going to talk about your favorite. I know a lot of people at home, this is a lot of people's favorite. The Muppet Christmas Carol, 1992. This was only the fourth Muppets theatrical film. And I just want to point out that we watched the version with the cut song When Love Is Gone, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm so because last year when I watched it on
Mm-hmm.
Disney Plus, I was like, "Where's the song?" Because
Mm.
the version I had on VHS,
Right.
that's the version we watched.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when "The Love Is Gone" was cut. Was it cut from the theatrical
Yeah, it was cut from the
release?
theatrical version, but it's in a lot of the home releases because
Okay.
basically they're like, it's too sad for children because it's about Scrooge and, his girl breaking up. But yeah, for me, it's the best song in the whole thing.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So
It
if you are watching on Disney Plus, which is how I think both of us watched it, it's not the main Disney Plus version has that song cut, but if you go to the extras, if you open the movie, go to the extras tab, under the extras tab, you'll see one that says like full version or something like that, and that has a song in it. And there's also, you can just watch the scene on its own under the extras tab as well.
Yeah,
So
but I'm so relieved that I got to watch the proper version of it this
right.
year because it was so disconcerting when I
Why would
watched
they
it.
not make that like the main version? Like,
Yeah,
come on.
no, it's yeah. What are you
Yeah.
talking about? It's too sad. No, it's
It makes the film. Children need to
well, I wouldn't
understand
go
depth.
quite that far, but yeah,
Oh, for me it does.
it's a major bit of the film. So yeah, this is my favorite version of um this is my favorite film version of A Christmas Carol. It's where I was originally, like I said in the introductory episode, it's where I was originally introduced to the story.
Mhm.
It was the last Christmas present I was bought by both of my grandparents on my
Mhm.
mum's side. So I got the VHS of this, and my brother got the VHS of Aladdin,
Ah,
the Disney,
I like his. Oh, they
yeah, the
came out
cartoon.
they were competing head to head in the
Yeah,
theater.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, I am here to tell the story, and I am here for the food. It made me laugh when I was 8. It made me laugh when I'm 41. There's so many great lines in this.
Mm.
Mr. Dickens, Charlie, are you hoits? Didn't even break his concentration. What was it? Okay, how do you know what they're doing? We're down here and they're up there. Storytellers are omniscient. Oh, hoity-toity, Mr. Godlike Powers.
No, I'm really glad that this one brings so many people so much joy. Um, it was directed by Brian Henson, who's the son of Jim Henson, and this is only 2 years after his father's death. So this is like in the beginning of him sort of establishing himself independently, and obviously this was a big one for him ultimately. It was written by Jerry Jewell, who's also mostly known for Muppet stuff, and the film's original score was composed by Miles Goodman, with songs written by Paul Williams, and Scrooge was played as a human by Michael Caine. This was actually the first Muppets film to be produced by Walt Disney Pictures. Later Disney would acquire, the rights to the Muppets characters in 2004. So like 12 years after this, but this was the first one that they produced. And after the script was submitted for approval, it was going to be an ABC show. It was going to be an ABC TV movie, but then the executives of Walt Disney were like, wait, let's make this a theatrical release.
Yeah, and they were absolutely right.
Yeah. Apparently, they considered a few people to try to be Ebenezer Scrooge before they settled on Michael Caine. So I know they considered an American comedian, George Carlin. I know him. I don't know the English actors, David Hemmings, Ron Moody, and David Warner. Do you know those names?
Well, David Warner was Cratchit in
Oh.
the '84 version.
Oh,
That's David
okay.
Warner.
Okay.
And I know David Hemming, and boy, did they dodge a bullet there, because David Hemming is not Ebenezer Scrooge.
Mm.
I'm trying to think what you would know David Hemming from.
Mm.
Have you seen Gladiator? Not the sequel that just came out, but
The original,
the
sure, of
original
course.
Gladiator.
I rewatched it recently, yeah.
He is David Hemming is the guy is the announcer in the Colosseum. The
Okay.
guy wearing the wig.
Mm.
Who isn't
Okay.
that's David Hemming.
Okay. Okay, well, I mean, I'm glad they went with Michael Caine. That
Yeah, and
seems he's the best part of the film for me for sure.
it's an interesting point in Michael Caine's career, because like
Mm.
Michael Caine had a very shaky 1980s, because he'd kind of entered that dead zone for actors where they're too old to play like the leading man, but they're not
Mhm.
old enough to play
Mm.
like the wise elder. It's
You're
that
right.
sort of valley of middle age. Um, and I always feel like this is the moment where Michael Caine's career sort of enters its sort of latter phase. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's a brilliant performance. And what makes it so good is he takes it seriously. He plays it
Mhm.
dead straight.
Well, he says he was quoted saying, "I'm going to play this movie like I'm working with the Royal Shakespeare Company. I will never wink. I will never do anything muppety. I'm going to play Scrooge as if it is an utterly dramatic role and there are no puppets around me." And I personally appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a brilliant acting choice, because it allows the Muppets to be as Muppety as you like, without the film losing a sense of realism is too strong a word, but gravity.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
He says he took inspiration from the role from the Wall Street cheats and embezzlers. I thought they represented a very good picture of meanness and greed, which is basically Scrooge was a prototype of these Wall Street cheats and
yeah.
embezzlers. So, yeah. um, it turned out it was not as big a success as as Disney predicted, but obviously it became a classic. Obviously, you love this. Anything else you want to let out about your love before I get into
Just,
my
just,
feelings?
just so many good lines. How would the
Mhm.
bookkeepers like to spend the Christmas on the unemployment line? He waved. Also, also, because this is how I was introduced to the story. When I first read the novella, I was like, "Oh, there's only one Marley.
Mm.
That's weird. Where'd the other one? Because obviously they've got Statler and Waldorf
Uh-huh.
as Marley and
Oh,
Marlon.
right, so you were expecting it
Yeah,
to
I
be
was expecting two of them, and
Mm.
every year it makes me smirk that there's Jacob and Robert Marley.
Mhm.
It's just a wonderful little in joke.
Yeah, so you know this about me. I have to be upfront with listeners. If you want to hear me get as excited about as Luke sounds now talking about the Muppets, you've got to ask me about Muppet Babies. But otherwise, the live action Muppets are just not really my thing. And I know that I am like the outlier in this. I know, like, I always feel like I'm saying bah humbug when I talk about the Muppets. I know it's like my least popular take out there, but the humor is just not my humor. It's very like violent toward each other and just kind of, I don't know, it just doesn't, it's not for me. Just slapstick in general is not for me. Although I do love the Jim Henson Labyrinth and Dark Crystal, so take all
Yeah,
that
so
for what it's
it's
worth.
not a Jim Henson thing. Then it's specifically the Muppets.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
specifically the Muppets. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's just you know what? And it's also like Sesame Street doesn't do it for me either. I was always like as a kid, I was too precocious. When they put me in front of Sesame Street, I'd be like, "Why are you talking down to me? Count. I can count." But anyway, so with that out of the way, I'm going to focus on the things I do like because I know how much people love this. So, Michael Caine makes a great Scrooge. He's got a lot of pathos. I would love to see him and do play that role again. I think the songs are decent, especially the "When Love Is Gone" song. Um, and yeah, it's surprisingly faithful adaptation at times. And I just absolutely love that they thought of Fozziewig. that's brilliant, and that's exactly as it should be. Makes the universe feel right.
Yeah, the love is gone is fine. I like the song at the end. With a
Isn't that's a
thankful
reprise of When Love
no,
Is
with a
Gone?
thankful heart. With I think it is called With a
Oh,
Thankful Heart or something. But
okay.
where they're sort of parading to Bob Cratchit's house at the
Okay,
end with the turkey.
maybe I don't remember.
I
I mean,
like
I
that.
know there was a When Love Is Gone reprise
There
at
is a
the end, but I
reprise,
thought it
but
was,
yeah,
yeah.
no, there's a song just before that which I
Mm.
really like.
So, by the way, did you know that they were going to use as the ghosts? They ended up like kind of inventing new characters for the ghosts because they wanted to like make, keep it more faithful and make the
Yeah,
ghosts creepy. But they were considering using the established characters as the ghosts at first. So they were going to have like a Robin the Frog. Who's Robin the Frog?
don't know.
Do they mean Kermit? I don't know. Or
No,
Scooter. I know who Scooter is
yeah.
as the ghost of Christmas past. They were considering Miss Piggy for the ghost of Christmas present, which actually I think was a better fit than Mrs. Cratchit personality wise.
Actually, see, this is one of the reasons I like A Muppet's Christmas Carol over other Muppets media because it doesn't actually rely that much on Kermit and Miss Piggy. I don't care for Miss
I just think
Piggy all
she's
that much.
miscast as Miss Cratchit, and she would have been a better ghost of Christmas present.
Okay.
Gonzo, before they decided to make him Dickens, he was considered, or Animal was considered as a ghost of Christmas yet to come. I feel like Animal would have been a good one because he doesn't talk.
Yeah, Animal would have been a good one.
But yeah, they ended up choosing new characters because yeah. Um,
Gonzo is Dickens. Gonzo is Dickens. Just inspired.
yeah,
He will be
apparently
he will be
they
coming round that corner now.
apparently they chose Gonzo as Dickens because Henson thought it was the least likely character to play Dickens.
Yeah, no, it's just brilliant.
um, So I found this interesting because they have humans and and puppets together. So they would have to have like these open floors, and they would have like Michael Caine would just be walking on thin beams on open floors, so that people could stick the puppets up between
Oh,
the
really?
gaps in the floors around him.
I didn't
Yeah,
know that. I didn't know that.
and then they would do other shots where they put the floors back so he could like walk and have it look normal.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't so this Dickens narration thing, this obviously comes back from the original readings and stage plays from even before the first adaptation, but I felt like in this case it made the Scrooge feel more distant from the viewer.
No, I'm sorry. Like
Yeah, I
Gonzo and
know. We're not going to
no,
agree
we're
on
not
this.
going to agree on this.
um, yeah, I'm so glad that you love it. Do you want to gush about it one more time before we move on
Just
to my
yeah,
favorite?
no, it's just like I say, just so many good lines.
hmm
Um, I had like 1,600 brothers and sisters. You're right. Rats don't really don't understand these things. And also Sam the American Eagle, like, it is the American way. It is the British way.
Yeah, that was a
This-
good one.
yeah, this is the thing. All
Yeah.
these lines made me laugh as a kid, and they still make me laugh as a 41-year-old. And that is
Mhm.
a very rare thing, possibly
Mhm.
unique, to be honest.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fair, that's fair, that's fair. I feel that way about Mickey's Christmas Carol from 1983. And, that one, it's also a short. It's only if you watch it on its own without the other shorts it's sometimes packaged with, it's 27 minutes. 3 of those are opening credits. By the way, it's available on Disney Plus, but not in the EU for some reason, so annoying. It was directed by Bernie Mattinson, and Mattinson, he worked at Disney from 1953 until he died last year in 2023. So more than 70 years. He was there until he died at the age of 87. He was the longest serving employee in Disney history.
Good grief.
Oh, good for him. Good for him. And he also co-directed The Great Mouse Detective, by the way, which was a favorite of mine growing up too. Um,
I'd never seen this. This was
you'd
brand
never
new.
seen this one.
No,
What?
this was brand new to me.
Okay. I would say for the writers, there's literally 7 people credited. Scrooge is obviously Scrooge McDuck, played by Alan Young. This was made for, like, literally, they called him Scrooge McDuck. They had to make this
Yeah.
film. And it was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film, but this one didn't win. So, what were your overall thoughts on this one? First watch, I can't believe it.
See, I was never very big into Disney
Mm-hmm.
as a kid. I always preferred the Warner Brothers Looney Tunes
Mm-hmm.
cartoons, and I always thought, even as a kid, that Mickey Mouse had an annoying voice.
Hmm.
Um, but I did really,
What do you
yeah,
mean?
but I did quite enjoy this. I obviously Scrooge McDuck is literally Scrooge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, and also I like Jiminy Cricket as the Ghost of Christmas Past. I thought the Ghost of Christmas Present and the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come kind of get a slightly short shrift
I
in this
mean, they always get
adaptation.
less, but yeah. All right. Are you ready to hear me gush about A
I am
Christmas
ready to
Carol
hear you gush. Yeah,
adaptation? So, I mean, I think that it's probable that this is the first version of the story that I was exposed to. Um, because I was definitely a Disney kid growing up. And after now watching a bunch of other versions and reading the book, which I probably read in high school, but this is like the first time I really remember of it. I just and now I appreciate it all the much more as an adaptation. It's also it stands alone well as a piece for children, probably more than adult, but I still appreciate it as an adult. Um, but also just the way that it keeps to the story well. It does have to condense it intensely because it's only like 25 minutes long. So I do find it interesting that there are a lot of people, including myself, who misremember this as a feature film instead of a short. And this could be because it was packaged often in an hour-long version with other shorts, but I think it also just shows like how well it conveys a full story despite cutting down the scenes.
yes. I mean, rather like the 71 animation, it gets across the spirit of the story.
Mhm.
Well, the only sort of uh, slightly odd choice I thought was had to have Goofy as
Marley? Oh no,
Marley.
come on. Goofy is Marley. That's my Marley, man.
Really,
Like
really?
think of him next to the 1951 version, like camp.
Yeah, I suppose there is the same
High
kind
camp.
of high camp. Yeah,
Hmm.
and I do like the watch the first step. Wow, that goofy like little scream thing of his that he does.
Yeah, the steps sequence is iconic,
Yeah,
yeah. But I just think that this adaptation makes a lot of smart decisions, and so you get, like, that warm-hearted Disney animation silliness, but it never feels rushed. So, like, I think that it was a good idea, for instance, we'll talk about this more, but the fact that they, combine the different Christmas future views into, like, one cemetery scene, like
yeah,
it's a way to keep the pace good, but keep the pace on point, but also convey the complexity of the different situations that are coming to a conclusion there.
yeah,
So I also think it's interesting to look at this not only as an adaptation of the book itself, because it takes almost no words directly from the book, which makes sense because it's speaking to children, so it paraphrases everything. Um, but it's an adaptation of the previous adaptations, which is a concept I brought up. But I noticed, for example, like the Albert Finney musical that we were just talking about a few minutes ago. It seems to be really influential in this one. I'll point out some of the things as we go through this as well. But I think it's one of the less faithful classics just because of its length, but it's maybe my favorite.
yeah. No, and like this is the thing, like all of these adaptations are caught up in your own memories of them and your own sense of nostalgia. So it's really not for anybody else to say
Yeah.
what's yeah, it's kind of what affected you. And
But
like
technically, I think it's good
yeah, no,
too.
it
Yeah.
is. It is. And it had been like the first because I watched the making of featurette
Uh-huh.
that you sent me as well.
Yeah.
And I hadn't realized it had been that long since there'd been a Mickey Mouse. There'd been like
Yeah.
it was
30
like 30
years.
years since there'd been a Mickey Mouse cartoon.
Yeah. So this making of featurette is called The Making of Mickey's Christmas Carol. Yes, very logically named. And it's only 24 minutes and you can find it on YouTube if you want to watch it yourself, but it was made 1 year after the movie, so 1984. So it's still like this 80s time capsule, very charming. Like they have
Yeah.
Jiminy Cricket there as sort of the go-between.
I've got to say, I was expecting, "Hi, I'm Troy McClure. You may remember me from such infomercials as." Yeah,
I thought it was a nice time capsule, and also it was a surprisingly deep dive into the voice
it
talent.
was.
They got
Yeah,
really into the voice talent.
the voice stuff is really interesting,
Yeah.
particularly the guy who was voicing Scrooge McDuck, who
Mhm.
had moved from Scotland as a
Right.
kid and was trying to get rid of his accent.
And now he's like, "Get it back, get the
Get it
accent
better.
back." Yeah. Yeah, so I learned some fun facts, and it's like, yeah, that whole thing about it being Mickey's first movie in 30 years, but also I don't know if I knew that Daisy Duck used to be called Donna Duck at first. That was her
No,
first
I
name.
didn't. No, I
Yeah.
didn't know that either.
And I appreciated at the beginning, they have Jiminy Cricket and they're like, Jiminy, get Mickey and his gang, enjoy yourself, but watch the budget.
Wah, wah, wah.
I love that they just put that into the making of.
Yeah.
But yeah, Scrooge McDuck, by the way, created in 1947, so it took nearly 40 years for them to finally give him his namesake role.
I gotta say, I was a big fan of DuckTales
Yeah, me
as a
too.
kid. Yeah.
DuckTales. Woo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always wanted to dive into the big vault of money. That looked like fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I thought all of them were well cast. We'll talk about a bit more as we go through, but I just love this one. It's just a really nice, like, I feel like every year I should watch this one and the 51 one.
Yeah. There's just something about those adaptations that just make you feel like everything is right with the world.
But there's hope at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts on the initial impressions of the movies overall?
No, except to say there are so many we could have picked
Yeah.
and didn't. Like we could have been at this for like 5 hours if we'd wanted to be.
Well, I mean, we are definitely going to do it a reprise next year. No question.
Yeah.
I may have already made a preliminary list that I'll show
Oh
to you.
crikey.
I mean, it was just part of making this list, you know?
Yeah, but like yeah, there are just so many adaptations
Yeah.
of this. And yeah, that's partly to do with it being out of copyright, but
Mhm.
also it's such a solid structure to adapt.
Right.
Like you've got a sort of classic 3 act structure and then sort of a prologue, epilogue. And yeah, it's just like it's a 4 chords of pop
Mhm.
thing. You've got this basic structure that you can then play around with and add stuff on and take stuff off,
Yeah.
and it's incredibly adaptable.
And also reminds me, for some reason, it was reminding me of like the like 4 flavors people want. Was it like fat, heat, salt, sweet, or something like that?
Yeah, an umami which doesn't
Yeah.
actually exist.
Yeah. Well, that's fat. That's fat.
Okay.
But yeah, it's like that in films. It has the ghost story, it has the redemption arc, it has, it's got something for everyone. It's got it brings together all the different things, and obviously from its inception musical elements are built into. So, but we're not done talking about these 9 classic versions that we've chosen for this year. We're going to put them head to head, talking through stave by stave some of the most iconic moments right after a quick break. Okay. First, we're back. We're doing our Christmas pit, a Christmas Carol adaptations. Go head to head. We have to start with the big question. Out of the 9 that we talked about today, what are the best Scrooge is? Or I think we have to agree on 1 or 2 of the best Scrooges. And I'll say I've already narrowed it down to a few that I think are the top contenders. I feel like you've already eliminated one in our discussion, but I'll talk through what I laid out. So Alistair Sim, who's both 1951 and 1971. Patrick Stewart, 1999. Albert Finney, 1970. I feel like you're going to tell me to cross that one out, and that's fine. Scrooge McDuck, 1983, and Michael Caine, 1992. So you
Yeah.
go ahead, eliminate one.
Well, I think the easiest one to eliminate, and this is no surprise based on what we said earlier, is George C. Scott.
Well, okay, but I mean, of this, I already pre-eliminated him, but on
Okay.
this list,
Of this, probably Albert Finney.
yeah, I
Um,
figured.
it's an odd portrayal of Scrooge. He almost
Mm,
plays him as kind of
but I
he
like
almost
it.
plays him as kind of like a hobgoblin, and it's kind of
He
not
was
quite.
35, so he played
Yeah,
the young version and the older version, and I like that. I thought he was
yeah,
versatile, but
yeah.
no,
It is, but it's just it's too much. The evil
yeah.
Scrooge is too evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Oh man. Okay, so now I have to eliminate one, and I can't.
you gotta pick somebody,
I
Alicia.
gotta pick somebody. Damn. Okay. Oh, this is ripping my heart out. I'm going to go with Scrooge McDuck.
He's literally called Scrooge.
Okay, I'm undoing it. I'm going with Patrick Stewart then.
That's harsh.
Okay, I'm undoing it. I'm going it with Michael Caine then. See? There are no
Okay,
winners.
okay.
There are no
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
I'm sticking with Michael Caine though.
okay, okay, okay,
Now you have to pick one.
okay. I've got to eliminate another one. Um, in that case, I am gonna go with. I think I'm gonna go with Alice the Sim.
Oh.
Just because there is a lot to like in that film, but Scrooge is not actually the most is not the best role in that film.
Oh.
It's Marley, and
Okay.
I really like the guy that plays Cratchit
Yeah.
in that film as well.
All right. Okay. Then yeah, that's down to Patrick Stewart and Scrooge McDuck, and I'm gonna take out Patrick Stewart and give it to the namesake then.
Okay,
Almost out in the first round.
almost.
And now he's our official. All right. So let's talk about Stave One, Chapter One. It's called Marley's Ghost in the book. And this is basically it's the first meeting with Marley, but also everything that happens in and around the counting house. And I always note that in the book, the song that the carolers sing that he gets mad about, which is usually the song that opens the movies, it was God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. But for some reason, they seem to almost always change it. And I don't understand because it's in the public domain. Like, is it too religious or so it's
No,
often
because they often change it to Once in Royal David City, which is just as religious.
well, it's often Hark the Herald. So 1951 and 1970, it's Hark the Herald. In 1971, in the animated short, it was God Rest You Merry Gentlemen. Muppets opens with a medley of carols, and the Patrick Stewart one, it's Good King Wenceslas. That's the more secular one. But he
Yeah,
still chases
again,
the kids away with a ruler in that, like in the book.
yeah.
I know. I'm always tracking that now. That's one of the things I always have my eye
Okay.
on. Did you notice no adaptation has in the novella? Bob Cratchit, he can't even really afford a good winter coat, so he
Yeah,
like,
he's wearing like a comforter. He's wearing a blanket.
yeah, he's like strapped a blanket to himself, basically. And I don't think I can think of a single adaptation that's done that. So if anyone
No,
else
it would
knows,
look kind of silly on screen. It would look like it was too much.
yeah, hmm, hmm, yeah, and there's some different openings. That's like, for instance, in 1951. They start elsewhere. Yeah, it's fine, it makes sense. I also brought up previously that they often say that the nephew married against Scrooge's wishes, which makes no sense. In 1951 commits that sin. That's my cinema sin.
Yeah, it's not
um
that he marries against Scrooge's wishes. He just
yeah,
marries because he marries. Like Scrooge is not involved.
Right. And Scrooge is
Scrooge
just
think,
like, why would you get married?
yeah,
Not
Scrooge is
like,
like,
why would you marry her? There's
yeah,
nothing
no,
about
Scrooge just
her.
doesn't like the whole institution of marriage.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He's bitter because it didn't work out for him.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert that you should know. um, and you already brought up the 1984 Scrooge running into Timmy in that opening sequence outside the shop. Like, that didn't work for me either. It just made him look more mean and weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I do think that the 1991 was particularly good in this opening. We got that full on Dead as a Doornail riff at Marley's funeral, as you said.
Yes.
We also get they talk about Dutch tiles, which obviously catch my eye because it's like for anyone who doesn't know, they're like Delft Blau, Delft Blue. They are basically their imitation of Chinese tiles, but for hundreds of years, the Dutch have been doing Dutch landscapes in this blue paint on white tiles. Very characteristic. I happen to just really love the look, and they actually showed that like where he's hallucinating and seeing animations in those. Like,
Yeah,
it's such a specific detail to include.
it is.
It never gets included. And also the scenes of the bound spirits trying to do good but unable. Like 1951 was good about that too, about the people flying around, and you know, I
Yeah.
like that scene. And I thought the 1970 was good here too. Like that also that the twists on it that they did. Like he's like, there's no such thing as rich enough, only poor enough. Like they're taking it, I don't know, they're modernizing it in a way that
Yeah.
fits with the book. And they show him collecting debts in the 1970 version at this point, which plays a role, in the fact they never really show how there's a whole thank you very much singing thing
Yeah.
in this musical movie, and that comes from this fact that he in Christmas future, he's like, show me one person who's feeling good, and they're celebrating him being dead because he's a dick about debts.
Yeah, and he doesn't. And the thing that makes it art is he doesn't realize it. He thinks they're celebrating him for being a good guy.
Right. Oh yeah, in
Um,
the musical.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but also like they subtly alter like Scrooge's profession in some of the adaptations. So the 1951 one, he's more explicitly like a banker and a merchant
Mhm.
banker. There's the whole
Right.
bit of him and Marley committing fraud. The 1984 one, he's sort of a great. He's yes, he lends money, but he's also kind of a grain merchant. Because
Mhm.
there's the whole thing where he goes down to the exchange and is basically blackmailing the blackmailing some of his business associates into buying expensive corn.
Right.
Um, there are like in the Muppets and the 1999 one. It isn't really explicit what line of business Scrooge is in, except that he needs a clerk.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, they do kind of subtly alter what exact line of business
Right.
Scrooge is in.
Right. Which I think makes sense. We'll talk more about the twists later, but it makes sense if he's like a financial guy, or yeah, he'd be a tech bro today
Yeah, he
probably.
would. Like, yeah, he would.
Um, so we already lavished praise on the 1951 Marley, but I also like the 1971 Marley. The way he moves, weird. It's like, and then he pulls over a chair, and then instead of sitting in it, he sits next to it. I like that sort of unsettling quality.
Yeah, I like the 1999 Marley because they do the thing of his chin
Right,
being held up by the rapper and doing the whole
right. Actually,
unwinding it thing.
yeah. Oh, yeah. They do, they tend to show him with his chin tied up with like some cloth, but it's rare that they actually untie it to show the chin
His chin
flopping against
fall.
his
Yeah,
chest. If he doesn't, yeah,
yeah,
like that's a book thing for anyone who doesn't know. Yeah. And one trope that comes back again and again that happens in the 71 is that in the musical is that Marley says the ghosts come in one night. And I like in the book the fact that people might not understand why he's like, the ghost did it all in one night. It's because from his experience, he's experienced like a fortnight basically.
yeah. Basically, yeah.
He's been through the 12 days of Christmas and at least two more. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Muppets one, as we said, the narrator's Dickens. And so we had Gonzo because he was the least likely, but Rizzo the Rat was playing the Greek chorus version, which I thought was a nice touch.
Yeah,
We had Cratchit the frog.
yeah.
um, I was bothered by the extra rats in the counting house to help. All of our assets are frozen, ha ha ha. But and I thought Kane was a little too mean spirited to start. But I know you're going to disagree with me, so that's
No,
fine.
Kane might be a little bit too mean spirited to start, but I just love the how would the bookkeepers like to spend Christmas on the unemployment line? He wave. This is where yeah, it's just oh forget it. I'll be here all night if we start.
No, I'm so glad to see you bring so much joy from this one. We also get so Fred in this version is also human, which I guess makes sense if it's his nephew. He says lines directly from the book. And interestingly, Kermit argues against opening on Christmas because no one is open to do business with it and it's a waste of coal, which is a really smart argument you don't see anywhere else.
Yeah.
It doesn't
And
work, but it was a good try.
and yeah, we'll pick this up when we do the twists, but there's a bit in It's Christmas Carol where
Mm.
she makes all the employees come in and it's like no, you wouldn't even if you nowhere's open on Christmas. Like it's a waste of time and effort.
Mm. I do you like that ice skating interlude in the first part of the Muppets movie? I've got to
No, not really.
say it doesn't work for me.
No, it is one of the weak points
Okay, it's not
of
just
that.
me.
Yeah.
But I do like that they show he doesn't have a dinner in the pub like we talked about, but it's definitely a lonely dinner. And as you pointed out, it's a double Marley. Um, I think that it's the best door knocker scene, the Muppets.
Yes.
And there's I'll put in the notes a link to a video that compares all the door knocker scenes across a whole bunch of like these adaptations and others. Um, and I think the chains, yeah, are fairly accurate. I think they're too mean. That's my problem with most of this. Is everyone's a little too mean. That's why the Muppets. Why are the Muppets so mean? Why do people? Anyway, sorry. I know how much people love them. My question though about Double Marley is: did they die at the same time?
And that is an interesting question.
Hmm.
That is an interesting question. But yeah, I love the fact that one of them is called Robert. That's such an if
Why?
you, well because Bob Marley.
Oh
Yeah,
gosh. Thank you. Click.
yeah,
The coin just dropped.
yeah.
Okay. Um, well, okay, so I love Goofy Marley. You seem to be have mixed feelings about it. Mickey was a little sorry, not Mickey. Scrooge is a little mean here. Marley left money for his tombstone and Scrooge had him buried at sea. But I thought it was a good bit with the coal and like thawing out the ink. And he only gets half a day off, by the way, which is insane.
Yeah.
But then he lets Cratchit go 2 minutes early. Mickey Cratchit.
And also, I love the fact that Mickey Cratchit is doing Scrooge's laundry.
Yeah, this is an
Yeah,
extra detail because that comes back to play later. It's like, oh, you're cooking a turkey. Like, no, we're cooking your laundry.
laundry. Yeah,
uh, and Donald plays Fred, which, yeah, that makes sense. That would be the nephew
yeah.
of Scrooge McDuck. Um, and we have the detectives as charity men. So this was really tied to that the detectives movie. The Mouse Detectives. Um, The tickling Marley shadow in the stair scene, I think, is iconic. You mentioned him falling, but I think the whole scene, I just have, maybe it's just iconic to me personally. Listeners, tell me if you feel the same way, but I have it like imprinted in my brain. Although it does bother me that Goofy Marley holds up two fingers when he says three, and I get that he has one finger less, but still counting works the same. He should hold
Yeah.
up all three of his fingers. So that's my nitpick for the entire film. Do you have any other thoughts on the first stave as represented across the films?
Um, I really like Dominic West's performance as Fred in the
Yeah.
1999 one, and I like there's a little scene with where Fred is walking out of the counting house, and
Mhm.
the two charity well wishers are walking towards it, and they're asking directions,
Mhm.
and it's just like, you're not from around here, are you? You just Fred said something like, "You're not from around here, are you?"
Uh-huh.
Like there's the look of what, yeah, you. No wonder you're asking directions. Like anybody who knows Scrooge knows better than to ask him for money, and it's a
Right,
really
right.
short scene, but Dominic West like plays it with real devilment, like
Mhm.
real mischief.
Yeah, I guess only people who listened to the novella episode heard this, but Fred is kind of low key my favorite character.
Yeah.
Just, just stubbornly optimistic. We could all learn from Fred.
Although I want to know what Fred does for a living, because like clearly he's not badly off
Scrooge
either. He's
keeps
like the
talking like he's poor, but he has
yeah,
servants.
he's like solidly upper middle class at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any other first Dave thoughts, Marley or and Co?
No, but it's just like you have to get the Scrooge right in this.
Yeah.
Like I said before, Scrooge is not. It's it's a point that can't be overstressed. Scrooge is not evil.
Mm-hmm.
He is indifferent,
Mm-hmm.
and that makes the story so much more powerful. Because genuine out and out evil in the world is a relatively rare thing. But
Right.
all of us are indifferent to one extent
Mm.
or another. All of us want to just be left alone by the world at times
Right.
and not be bothered by it. And I think that's the point that Dickens is making, that everything that happens in the world ultimately affects everybody in it. That
Right.
it is your responsibility to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think getting that tone right at the beginning really can like make or break the adaptation for
Right.
me.
Right. Exactly. No, I
Yeah.
think that's very well put. Very well put, Luke. All right. Well, let's get into stave two, the first of the three spirits, aka the ghost of Christmas past. And I have to say, since I read or reread the novella recently for this project, um, I've gotten a little bit obsessed with Dickens' description of the ghost of Christmas past because it's not, it's, you can understand why it's so difficult to represent on screen. So I'm just going to start by reading his description from the novella of the ghost of Christmas past. So it was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium which gave him the appearance of having receded from the view and being diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. The arms were very long and muscular, the hands the same, as if its hold were of uncommon strength. Its legs and feet, most delicately formed, were, like those upper members, bare. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and round its waist was bound a lustrous belt, the sheen of which was beautiful. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and, in singular contradiction of that wintry emblem, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a bright, clear jet of light, by which all this was visible, and which was doubtless the occasion of its using, in its duller moments, a great extinguisher for a cap, which it now held under its arm. Even this, though, when Scrooge looked at it with increasing steadiness, was not its strangest quality, for as its belt sparkled and glittered, now in one part and now in another, and what was light one instant at another time was dark, so the figure itself fluctuated in its distinctness, now being a thing with one arm, now one leg, now with 20 legs, now a pair of legs without a head, now a head without a body, of which dissolving parts no outline would be visible in the dense gloom wherein they melted away. And in the very wonder of this, it would be itself again, distinct and clear as ever. Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me? Asked Scrooge. I am. The voice was soft and gentle, singularly low, as if instead of being so close beside him, it were at a distance. Who and what are you? Scrooge demanded. I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Yeah, that would be very hard to represent on screen, and it would cost an arm and a leg not to be
Or
uh
20.
or 20. Yeah, it would be very difficult to do.
But this explains why The Ghost of Christmas Past, in, for instance, the 1971 animated short, the Oscar winner, that one has like all these kind of blurred arms and legs, you know?
Yeah.
And we see just a lot of androgyny in general.
Yes.
Even in the Muppets one, the Christmas Past is like this sort of immortal child puppet.
Yes. It is even a puppet. It's kind of a. It's a. I. I'm not sure what it is. I always thought it was like early CG, like possibly early CG or interesting.
I think the 1951 movie with Alistair Sim, The Christmas Past, was one of the most disappointing parts. It's just mundane, whatever,
Yeah.
fine. I guess they
Yeah.
just try to make it sort of ambiguous in age or whatever. 1984 Christmas Past, I keep calling Cyndi Lauper.
Yes. Yeah. It's not Cyndi Lauper, but yeah,
No, it's
it's
very
very much
80s.
inspired by
But they did at least do the thing where shoving the Christmas past into the hat. This is what happens at the end, and he ends up back in the bedroom and then meets the next ghost. Yeah.
yeah.
um, yeah, the 1999 one, it wasn't like the 1971 one. It's animated. They can make it weirder. They can have the light. They can have the multiple arms. The 1999 one is at least like more androgynous, ambiguous with the
Yeah.
outfit and the caps there too.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1970 though, Fail, just like a grand dame,
Yes.
the
Yeah, like
musical.
they didn't put a lot of effort into that.
Mm, yeah. And for Mickey, it was Jiminy Cricket, which fine, fair.
Fair
Fair
enough. Yeah.
substitution.
Yeah.
um I by the way, I wanted to point out that in the 1999 version, the Patrick Stewart version, the Ian McNeice played Fezziwig, the boss in the Christmas Past. And in the 2017 movie we're going to talk about, The Man Who Invented Christmas, he
Yeah,
played
he's Scrooge's publisher.
he played Edward Chapman, his publisher. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I noticed like in the musical from 1970 that they often show Scrooge dancing with Isabel at Fezziwig's ball. But and that this comes up a lot in a lot of adaptations. They do that, and I keep looking through the book, and I can't. That's not a thing in the book, right?
No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
Okay, but I do think it's good when they add more of their romance to the movie.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, the 70s musical breakup was cold.
It was. It really was. I actually look. This is one of the things that the '84 version does well, which is
Okay.
when Belle comes to collect him from the boarding school,
Mm-hmm.
and you actually see Scrooge interact with his father,
Uh-huh.
who's credited is in the credits as Silas Scrooge.
Yeah.
I don't think they actually say his name on screen, but it does kind of give you a sense of how awkward that relationship is because
Yeah.
they've got a whole Tywin Tyrion Lannister thing
Yeah.
going on that
Mhm.
Scrooge's father blames him for the death of his mother, like his mother dies in childbirth.
Mhm.
And I do actually think that's something the '84 movie does quite well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. And something the Muppets does well. We already brought up the eagle being. I like that they added the headmaster at the school.
Yes.
And the whole it's the American way. It's the British
And also,
way.
there's a great line in the novella where the one of the headmaster's assistants goes out and offers the coachman a curiously light wine and a curiously heavy piece of a curiously heavy piece of cake,
Yeah.
which I always thought was And if it was the tap he'd had before, he would rather not.
Oh. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the food stuff. It's also, why does the food have to be alive? But I
Mother told
liked,
Mother told me never to eat singing fruit.
yeah. But yeah, I already said I liked, Fozziewig was an inspired choice.
Yeah,
It's like Scrooge McDuck, Fozziewig, obviously.
it just worked. Well, I do like Ian McNeese's Fezziwig as
Hmm.
well. We like properly, you know. I
Right, from
like the
the
way they,
1999 Patrick Stewart one.
yeah,
Yeah.
they do that whole party
Hmm. Yeah, no,
very
they do
well.
that well. They do that well. Okay, so one problem with the Muppets is that Scrooge is already Scrooging at the Fozziewig party, and this is supposed to be a look at, like, remember when you were happy? Even
Yes,
though Belle's already there, and it's, yeah, wow. But they do have that "When Love Is Gone" song, which I like more than you.
yeah. Also, the actress they've got playing Belle in the Muppets is just stunningly pretty.
Hmm.
Just
Yeah.
stunningly pretty.
Yeah, and then in, Mickey, they had to condense things, so there's none of the childhood scenes, they have the Toad playing Fezziwig, Daisy's with young Scrooge instead of Donald, which is weird. But okay, and, their breakup is in the counting house because they have limited scenes that they can set up,
Yeah.
so but it does seem to take some cues from the Finney musical, but, like, Scrooge is even more horrible to Isabel in this than in that, so that's okay, fine, there's another mark against the Mickey one.
And in the 1951 one, Scrooge and Marley literally put Fezziwig out of business.
True, true, true,
Yeah.
true. Yeah, and you see him, like, sitting sadly in the coach.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Alright, any other thoughts about the second stave, The Ghost of Christmas Past?
I think this is my probably my least favorite bit of the book of the novella.
Really? Why is
Yeah,
that?
it's quite sad and like
Hmm.
the whole thing about Scrooge being abandoned at the boarding school. Like even
Mm.
when I read it as a kid, that seemed like yeah, you know what? Being kind of down on Christmas, I can kind of see where Scrooge is coming. I can kind of see where Scrooge is coming
Mm.
from.
It's very Dickensian.
Yes, it is.
Mm. I guess, yeah, it's something, I always like music in a minor key. I love the original Meet Me in St. Louis versions to, yeah, Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas,
Yeah,
Yeah, I think for me, Christmas is kind of laced with sadness. I don't know why, even though it's always been a big holiday in my family, and I always, except one year, have celebrated it with my immediate family. So, yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to perhaps the happiest of staves, stave 3, the second of the three spirits, aka the ghost of Christmas present. And yeah, in terms of additions, I like in the 1951 one that they give Alice, like considering that's one of the older ones we're talking about today. They made Alice, she was doing volunteer work. They didn't do the mines or the lighthouse or the ship, but they got through the idea in a more personal way by tying it
Yes,
to Alice, by the way, is Belle in other adaptations.
yes,
Yeah. Or Isabel, Scrooge's love. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I actually quite like the 1984 depiction of the Ghost of Christmas Present.
He's kind of sassy in the 1984
He looks,
version. It's Edward Woodward, which
yeah.
again is an odd odd casting choice. But yeah, he's
Why?
kind of quite sort of sassy with Scrooge.
Okay, okay. Well, okay, I've always, like, before I got my minor obsession with the Ghost of Christmas Past because of the description, it's so weird. My favorite was always the Ghost of Christmas Present because of I love Bacchus as a god, basically. I'm like, yes, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die.
Yeah,
um, I do notice in the 1984 version, the Cratchits seem better off. Like, and the son's collar fits. This is a touchy point for me now too. Like the son, Cratchit's son, should have a collar that's too big for him because he's
yes,
trying to grow into his father's role.
yeah,
Yeah, but the 1984 one did show more of the nephew's games, and they kind of they've staged it in such a way that I wanted to, like, jump in and play the games too. So they really gave you that feeling.
yeah.
But then, yeah, instead of getting the classic kids under the robes of the ghost of Christmas present, the children that are ignorant and want, we talk about that again more in the novella episode, but we get a destitute family in general. But then we get the kids under the robes again. So they're kind of like doubling down on the message in that sense. So I have to give
Yes.
them credit there. And they get across well that even the poor can find comfort on Christmas, which is like a big point that's made at length in the novella.
Yeah, I mean, I like the 1999 version
Mhm.
of this because it spends quite a bit of time on the Cratchits Christmas dinner.
Yeah.
I really love the description of that in the novella, and the care that's taken, and the whole taking the goose out to the bakers, and
Uh-huh.
the whole thing with the Christmas pudding as well. It's just like yeah, it's a very that whole thing about she wasn't sure if there was enough flour. That's a very Christmassy conversation because we don't really do like classic Christmas pudding because nobody in our house likes it. But my mum will always make a big trifle
Uh-huh.
for Christmas, and it's always like it's a big deal because it's the one time of year she'll do that.
Mhm.
And that whole conversation about did it turn out right? Does it taste right?
Right.
That seems very relatable.
Right. And that is tying back to the book too. And that's also the one, as you pointed out earlier, that has that Silent Night montage, and they actually stop by the lighthouse and the ship and then the mines, all these locations from the novella that are rarely put on screen. So, yeah, just extra points for all of that. Uh, and they do actually also age Christmas Present in that one, which
Yes,
they
they
don't
do.
do in many adaptations because Christmas Present only lives through this experience and then dies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, love the Muppets one. Come on in and know me better, man. You're a little absent-minded spirit. Oh, I'm a large absent-minded spirit.
Well, okay, so on the 1999 front, I have to ask you a question about so Scrooge's sister, who she died giving birth to the nephew, and so this is also a point of tension between them in all the stories. But her name in the novel is Fanny, which is like a classic old-fashioned name in I guess the US and the UK.
Yeah.
In the US, the name Fanny now is kind of funny because it means but I
Yes.
know it's an even more vulgar name in the UK. Like,
Yes.
how odd is it? Because they changed in the 1999 her name to Fran, presumably to
Yeah,
avoid
to
saying
avoid that.
a
Yeah.
woman's lady parts.
Yes.
But like, do people? Is anyone named Fanny anymore?
Actually, I had a student the other year called Fanny, whose first name was Fanny.
Okay.
Um, and she was I'm not sure. I'm not sure she was American. She had an American accent, but I'm
Mm,
not sure that was where she was originally from. But
okay.
yeah, it's not a common name.
Could be. Could be.
Yeah.
All right, I have a little beef in the fact that at the party, when they're at his nephew Fred's party, there is always this guy Topper who's chasing a girl, and she's described as chubby in the book, but she's never chubby in the adaptations.
No, no, she
Chubby
never is.
representation.
Represent the chubby, and also like Topper. He's a cad. He's
He's such a okay. So the 19 this is a beef with the 1999 version. Is that she actually the sister was encouraged? So it's Fred's wife's sister that his
yeah,
friend Topper is chasing, and she's actually encouraging it. Like it was borderline sexual predator in the novella. It feels like, and in the 1999 version, she's like, "Yeah, come and get
yeah,
it,"
like
and then they
yeah.
kiss. Kissing in Victorian England? I don't know about that.
It's a bit problematic.
Mm,
And like yeah, most of the adaptations either get rid of Topper altogether or play him like right down as a character because yeah, he's a bit of a cad.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I do think the 1971, Albert Finney musical, did The Present pretty well. I thought that that one had the best Christmas present throne of food. Like you really got
Yes.
like this room full of a throne of food.
Yeah.
And Scrooge drinks the milk of human kindness, which seems to be wine.
Yeah, he's like everybody's getting completely smashed of the milk of human kindness.
Well, there's a lot of mentions of alcohol in the book, which is funny why, like, for instance, the 1971, the animated short, the Oscar one, doesn't have any, I guess because it's for kids. But
Yeah.
1970, the Albert Finney musical, they're like, oh, yeah, we know alcohol is part of the story.
But this is the thing. In the novella, even the kids are drinking like neat gin and like warm
Right.
neat gin and lemon. So
It's better than the water. The water
yeah,
is
yeah.
dirty. Um, I also like that the 1970 the musical makes clear there's this line in the books that I never really got, to be honest, where the Ghost of Christmas Present says that he has 859 brothers and asks if Scrooge has met any of them. And they clarify in this movie that it's one brother a year since Christ, he says. Although I have a question then, why is the film set in 1860 and not 1843 when the novella was released? But whatever, that's fine.
Whatever.
They
Yeah.
explained that reference with the 1,859 brothers. So now I get it. Thank you. And I like that they, in that one, the musical showed more of the games at Fred's party. Um, Although I was confused. Did you get this when they said something like some guest at the party was apparently Isabel's daughter? Or
No,
or is
I
it and
didn't.
Isabel is Fezziwig's daughter in this? So they were like tying things together
Yeah, they were
more?
tying things together that weren't tied together
And I
in
was
the novella,
confused.
and they were
Yeah.
doing it in a really. It felt like there were scenes that should have been there,
Mm.
but like that had got cut,
Yeah.
were on the editing room
Yeah.
floor to tie it all together.
Yeah, I agree. And for some reason they renamed the nephew to Harry, which fine,
Yeah,
whatever, but that's not
makes
his
no
name.
sense. Yeah,
And there's no children of ignorance and want, but okay. But thank you very much.
thank you very much.
um so the 1971 animated short, we do get a God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen travel montage. So in some ways it's like, just even though it's short, it's super accurate to the
It
show.
is.
And I think it's funny though that Scrooge calls Fred poor. But yeah, as we talked about, Fred always has servants. Like
Yeah.
even Cratchit's in a four-room house. Like there were people living much, like maybe Dickens just couldn't imagine what the poorest are really like. Oh,
No, I
even though
mean, no,
he
I mean, this is the thing. Dickens, I think Dickens could, but
we'll
if you
talk
put,
about his life and his
yeah,
workhouse experience in
if
the
you
next
put that,
episode, but
if you put that in a book in 1843, it wasn't going to sell.
hmm,
Like this is the thing. Dickens was he was a social reformer. He was all of that, but he was an author that wanted to, he wanted to sell books. He
right,
wanted to
right. Well,
get
he was in
product,
debt at
and
that moment. Yeah.
there's a certain, I think there's a certain point you can push the sensibility of your readers so far,
Mm-hmm.
but like you don't want to. You want to make them feel guilty, but you want to make them feel just guilty enough,
Mm-hmm.
not so guilty that they're going to put the book down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right, switching gears to the Muppets and the presents. You have to admit that the Christmas present food spread was underwhelming. Although I appreciate as a vegetarian that it was all vegetables.
Yeah, it was all vegetables, yeah.
No alcohol, of course, that's fine. It was funny that because a Christmas present ghost is always a giant, but it's actually the same size as Michael Caine in this case because
Yeah.
puppet.
Like, I don't think any of them do this scene particularly well, and it's one of my favourite scenes in the whole thing, where Christmas Scrooge and the Ghost of Christmas Present are just wandering around as people are doing their last minute shopping on Christmas morning. And
Hmm.
like the descriptions of all the foods in the shops and just how jolly everybody is just really nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and they always sort of cut. I don't know how you do it, but they always seem to cut that scene slightly short, and it's one of the most like evocative, descriptive
Mm-hmm.
passages in the entire novella.
Yeah, when they're out in the streets and yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Criticism about the Muppets one is that I didn't like that the Christmas present ghost, that he was like forgetful, thinking only of the present. Because I like that the Christmas present ghost is kind of sassy and like acerbic. And I don't know, it's like Scrooge has amnesia. Somehow he doesn't remember that people play games at Christmas. He's like, what? What is this invention? Games?
But also like it's one of the best bits in the novella, like when and I think all the adaptations have this
Mm-hmm.
because it's so central to the story, but when the Ghost of Christmas Past is quoting Scrooge back to himself
Uh-huh.
when they're talking about Tiny Tim. And
Yeah.
I actually thought the 84 version did that really well.
What
Because,
about
like,
the workhouses? What about the poor? The
yeah,
surplus population can die.
because like
And
the
yeah.
Ghost of Christmas Present, like, really puts some
Mm-hmm.
venom in it. He really
Mm-hmm.
puts some sass
Right,
in it.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, as I already said, not enough Miss Piggy. She only shows up 2/3 of the way through. And think she's
See,
miscast as Mrs. Cratchit. She should have been the ghost of Christmas present.
see, that doesn't bother me at all because Miss Piggy was like by far and away my least favorite Muppet. Like the less you can do with Miss Piggy.
No, you just have to use her correctly. Use her. She would have been a perfect ghost of Christmas present. That acerbic thing that we were talking about, she would have been perfect.
Okay, yeah, I can
Yeah.
see that.
And there's no oldest daughter, Martha, although the oldest son is there. So yeah,
Yeah.
okay, fine. um, and then yeah, the Mickey one, the Christmas present was Jack's Giant. Yes, okay, that makes sense. They also previously that he's from Mickey and the Giant, and there was a lot of attention to the food part in that
Him,
one,
him trying to
but
say
no alcohol, of
him
course.
trying to say pistachio was like my favorite. Nougat, nougat.
I liked when he picks up because they all have this horn of plenty that's actually a torch that he carries around,
Yeah,
and this one just like plucks up a street lamp from the street and uses that. Yeah.
as a torch. Yeah,
The Cratchits are extra pathetic in the Mickey one. They
yeah.
really they
They
really make
really
sure they look poor.
tiny, tiny turkey.
Yeah. But yeah, we get a little shortchanged in all the different sections because it's so short. So he doesn't visit like his nephew's party or other places. So just the
Yeah,
Cratchits, basically. Hmm. All right. Any last thoughts on the Christmas present
yeah.
stave?
Best Dave. Like that's
Yeah, we talked
a
about the
lot of,
most.
yeah. It's just my favorite part of the book.
Yeah.
The most evocative part of the book as
Mm-hmm.
well. Like we said before when we were covering Dune, I don't have much of a visual imagination,
Hmm.
but so much of that stave is about um smell and taste and all the food and everything's
Yeah.
going on. So like oddly, I have more of an imagination when it comes to that, when it comes to those kind of senses than I do with as a visual imagination.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. I mean, one of my low key other stave, I like them all, but I like stave 4, The Last of the Spirits, aka The Ghost of Christmas Future, because this is like the creepy one where, he's confronted. By the way, did you know in this stave we talked briefly about the fact that there are 3 people who work for Scrooge in different ways and end up taking his belongings and pawning them after his death because nobody else cares. And the charwoman, who's one of the 3 people, Mrs. Dilber, she was played by Liz Smith in 2 of these adaptations, both
Yes.
1984 and 1999. That's really cool.
Yes, I did notice that. And like, yeah, Liz Smith's entire career, even when she was quite young, seems to be playing old hags in
Mhm.
like
I
in
don't really know her from anything else, but
no, like she was in a ton of children's programs in the
Mhm.
UK, and she always played that kind of character.
Okay.
She played a lot of witches.
Ah, okay. But yeah, I mean, I think the most iconic of this last stave is from the musical, the 1970 musical.
Oh,
It's
please don't! We need to get rid of that song.
I mean, it's when we get the whole group cheering for Scrooge dying. So there's no this is a break from the others where Scrooge is in like such deep denial where it's very clear to the reader or the viewer or whatever that the dead person that everybody is happy about being dead or doesn't care about being dead or whatever, that it's Scrooge. It's we all know, but he is in such denial until the last moment where obviously the ghost of Christmas future is pointing to the grave. And yeah, in this there's no denying it for him because they are literally dancing on his coffin as they carry it through the streets and sing, what do they sing?
Thank you
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
But yeah, but I love the fact that Scrooge is completely oblivious as to what's going on, which kind of undercuts the point because he's supposed to be horrified at his own death, but he's
I
so
mean, it
like,
is hard. There's singing and dancing and celebrating her death. That's
yeah,
horrifying.
but that's the thing. He doesn't realize
And
that's what
not
they're
in like the New
celebrating.
Orleans like jazz funeral way. Like they are glad you are dead.
Yeah,
Mm.
and if I had a flag, I'd have me flag out.
But yeah, so this is basically replacing those three people that we were talking about, the charwoman, the laundress, and the
Yeah,
undertaker's man. But yeah, worthy substitution.
I always like the bit that comes before that as well, with the three guys at the stock exchange going, old Scratch has got his at last. Yes,
Yeah.
it'll be a very cheap. It'll be a very cheap funeral.
Yeah. Well, so that's Old Scratch. That's the other thing that makes this such an iconic adaptation is we get this whole hell sequence. He goes to hell. Marley comes back.
And gives him a
Um
guided tour.
yeah, gives him a guided tour and then wraps him in endless chains and then he wakes up being strangled by his bed sheets in a similar manner
And also,
instead of like
he's such a good businessman. He's going to be the devil's bookkeeper.
right. Right.
Yeah,
I mean, I think there are a lot of later adaptations after 1970 that look back toward this and are like, yeah, let's hell up that final moment where
yeah,
he's looking at his grave. And so like in the 1990 version, he falls on himself in the grave and then through this hellish landscape to his bed. And you see that repeated in several adaptations.
yeah. Also, in the 1971 one, he's so evil he literally makes hell freeze over.
Wait, in the 1971
So in the 1971, the
in the
Albert Finney
musical,
one,
yeah.
yeah, he's literally so evil he makes hell freeze over.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's one of the most memorable parts of it for sure.
Yeah, it's like, hang on, I thought we were calling this because that's kind of on the borderline between is this a faithful adaptation and is this a twist?
Mm.
Because like the third stave of that goes really quite a long way from the book.
I mean, yes, a bit, but I think when we look at like the ones that we're watching for the twist episode, those are quite a step further.
Yes, they are.
Even Scrooge, that a lot of people consider an adaptation, it's
No, no.
I'm so sorry. Luke and I don't love Scrooged.
We'll
Oh,
get
but
to it. We'll
yeah,
get
we'll,
to
we'll
it. But
get to it. We'll get to it.
it's
All right.
certainly not an adaptation.
um But, yeah, I liked the Muppets one with the pawn shop where they have the spider puppet as Old Joe and all the bugs. That was, like, suitably creepy and atmospheric.
Yeah, I like the 19. Like I said, I like the fact that the 1951 version fleshes out the Char Lady and Mrs. Dilber.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because they're not just random characters that show up; they're like Scrooge's housekeepers.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. No, I like that so it's more meaningful when they show up at that moment. It's like, "Oh, well, yeah."
Yeah, they have a reason for being there.
Mhm. And also she's like when that's in the last part, but,
Yeah,
when wakes up again in the morning and his housekeeper is there and he's like, "You didn't take my curtains." She's like, "No." And she's, like, about to have him committed until he gives her a bunch of money, and then she's like,
yeah,
"No, actually this, new manic behavior is great."
yeah. Fine, just give me the money.
Okay, but, before we get into that, Mickey one, I the dog villain was Black Pete, and I don't know, I was always into, like, the goofy side of things, so maybe that's also why I liked him as Marley. So I enjoyed seeing Black Pete there. He's smoking a cigar and he talks at the end. Um, and we talked about this a bit, but I appreciate that they decided to make the most of the limited runtime and limited budget, as Jiminy Cricket was told, by combining the future visions in the same ceremony, and then he again
Yeah,
falls through the grave back to the bedroom, which I would say is also influenced by the 1970 musical. Hmm.
yeah.
Any final thoughts on the Last of the Spirits, Stay 4?
I mean, this is the bit where in all the adaptations and the novella, this is the bit where it's most clearly a ghost story.
Mhm.
Like it's meant to
I
be
like this one
horrific.
because it gets spooky. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, it's all, and a lot of that's to do with the fact that the ghost of Christmas yet to come doesn't speak.
Mhm.
And we'll get to this, but there's a whole thing in Spirited, the Ryan Reynolds, Will Ferrell
Mhm.
film about the ghost of Christmas yet to come. That I've got to admit, I did find that very funny. The
Yeah.
the spirit of Christmas yet to come wants some lines.
Yeah, no, I love that movie. It's funny. I'm looking forward to talking about it. But I
Yeah.
noticed, speaking of that movie, so I always have in my head that the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, that he has a skeleton hand. But in none of these adaptations today is that true, because it's not true in the book. It's only in the twists, but it sticks with you. Like it's
Yes.
in Scrooged, there's a skeleton hand. In Spirited, there's a skeleton hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Shall we get to stave 5? The end
Save
of it?
five. Yeah. The end of it.
So I appreciate that we talked about in the novella how they're these older functioning, the basically shops. The way society used to work in London is different than it works today. So, for instance, there was a separate poultier, who would just have birds basically. But now, obviously, in the 1951 version, they just call that the butcher because nobody has a separate poultier.
Yeah.
Um, and in the 1951 version, they call smoking bishops hot punch, the mulled wine. Although in 1999, they actually call it hot bishops or smoking bishops.
Yeah. I think. I think to be honest, it's made something of a comeback as kind of different types of like mulled wine, because
Hmm.
there's a load of there's like I put one in the chat that we have on WhatsApp, but there's a load of them now that have come up in my YouTube uh algorithm recommendations of how
Right.
to make
Well,
um
it is. I think there's especially a German influence on that. Like Germans are really good at Christmas, in case you didn't know. um, and I live in the Germany adjacent country, so we benefit from their spillover Christmas spirit. Literally, sometimes in the case of Glühwein, it's called, or wine that makes you glow.
which you actually, in order to get in the spirit of things, let's just Alicia is now 2 glasses of wine in.
And what describe the mug that it's in when
Oh
you
yeah, you
it's
are. You're
it's
wearing
a
like it's
red
a.
Christmas boot. It's from Christmas Village in Philadelphia. I grew up in Philadelphia, for anyone who doesn't know.
But yeah, Alicia's on her second cup of mulled wine. Yeah.
Do I seem merry?
No, no more so than usual.
Because I'm always on my second glass of Glühwein. um, But yeah, I already complained about 1984 feeling like a stage play. I feel like that was especially true in the last act. And speaking of updates, in the 1999, instead of we talked about in the novella, the walker, which means basically, I don't believe you. They say you're joshing, which feels a little too modern for me.
Yeah, but I do like the 1999 one. Like Patrick Stewart does the proper like Scrooge beginning to cough and then it turning into a laugh, which is
Oh,
how it
yeah.
how it's described in the book, because like he hasn't laughed for
but
such a long
then
time.
But then he only offers the boy 2 shillings instead of half a crown for the doing the turkey.
That's true, but I mean, we already sort of touched on this. The problem with the 1971 is Scrooge goes too far the other way. He's
Yes. Hmm.
almost certainly bankrupting himself.
Well, yeah, that's a problem with Scrooge too, where he not only gets him. Well, we'll talk about that, but he's gonna get himself fired and in jail.
Yeah.
um, okay, so the 1999 Patrick Stewart actually goes to church, which is interesting that we never see it anywhere else because we talked about in the novella episode about the controversy around whether this is too secular a story for Christmas.
Mm.
There were complaints of that. But I love in the 1999 one, something I haven't really seen elsewhere is they actually show the awkward moment where Scrooge has to apologize to his nephew and his wife and be like, "I'm sorry, I've been such an asshole.
Yeah.
Please let me come to dinner now."
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, the 1971 indeed. We said it goes too far. Each delivery boy gets half a crown and he buys a whole bunch of toys and yeah, he gives all these presents
Yeah.
and
And
a
he's just
bunch
like
more.
throwing money at the charity well wisher guys
Yeah.
as well.
They don't show the final party in that one, by the way. He just meets his nephew and wife in the street, but we get a reprise of Thank
Thank
You
you
Very
very much.
Much.
I thought I'm
um
gonna need surgery to get rid of that song.
All right, I'll distract you with Muppets. So Michael Caine, I think overall good portrayal. He gets mildly emotional at the end. I don't like when Scrooge is like, oh, it was only done in one night when there's no timey wiminess. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, Scrooge again. He takes a turkey to the Cratchits himself, and even old Fozziewig gets in the action. I've always loved the Foz, so
Yeah. And also there's a lovely moment with Beaker is one of the charity guys, and he is so moved by Scrooge's donation that he gives him his red scarf.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
And, I guess it's "The Love We Found" is the song that you like the reprise of at the end.
Yeah, no, there is another song
Okay.
before that where they're all marching
Okay.
to Cratchit's house.
Okay. Okay. And, yeah, and Mickey also brings Cratchits a whole sack of goods himself. Any other thoughts about the end of it?
Oh, just to say one thing more about the Muppets. The Muppet Beaker, the one with the tall ginger one, the guy that goes, the one that
Yeah, I know who
goes,
Beaker is.
there is there was a British politician in the 2010s called Daniel Alexander, who everybody always said looked like Beaker the Muppet because he was like
Ah,
Scottish guy,
mhm.
ginger, and like he was always much. So every time Beaker comes on screen, it's like, "Hello, Danny Alexander." It's like it's been locked into my brain now. As that is,
And I have to look him up.
those two will forever be associated with each other.
You have any overall final thoughts on these classics that we've talked about?
No, I really enjoyed. I mean, I enjoyed putting every episode together, but I really enjoyed all the stuff we've watched for
Mhm.
this. I'm really glad I watched the 1984, 1951 ones because
It's
they got kind of smushed together in my brain.
Uh-huh.
And it's nice to have them as separate entities.
Mhm.
Um, no, I really enjoyed doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I liked to revisit the ones, even the ones that I knew better, like, Mickey and Muppets. It's good to remind myself of what exactly happens. And also, I've just also really enjoyed. So I actually watched the 1951 first, and then I was like, and then I read the novella, and then I went back and rewatched the 1951 one, and I got so much more out of it after
Yeah,
reading the book, which I guess oh, surprise, surprise. But it's just been so fun to kind of like play the game as we go through of like how is it like the book? How does it adapt the book? Are the adaptations good things like in the Alistair Sim version when they add these extra dynamics. And yeah, it's been really fun. But I'm definitely looking forward to the other two episodes we have. So the next one is going to be a mini episode. It's we're going to be talking about the 2017 movie, The Man Who Invented Christmas, but we're also going to use that as a launch pad to talk just a little bit more about like the outline of Charles Dickens' life, what kind of person he was said to be, the circumstances that led to him writing this book, things like that. So,
Yeah.
and then we're going to have another full episode talking about the Christmas Carol twists that we've selected for this year. So we have six and a half.
Yeah.
So we're gonna watch two meta stories, classics. So there's Scrooged, the 1988 Bill Murray one. We have Flintstones Christmas Carol, which is just over an hour long, from 1994. And then we have three gender swap stories. Well, two and a half. We have It's Christmas Carol, which is stars Carrie Fisher. And then we have A Diva's Christmas Carol with Vanessa Williams. And then there's a remake slash reboot. This is the half, a new Diva's Christmas Carol. It's only from 2022. It was produced by Idris Elba and stars Ashanti. And yeah, I'm definitely gonna watch it. Luke's gonna see if he can squeeze it in.
Yeah. There's a lot of Christmas Carol
A lot of Christmas carols.
content. I've already seen It's Christmas Carol. I've already seen
Yeah, and there's
Scrooge.
two more because you've seen one of them. You've seen Spirited. We talked about Spirited. So these are like the weird musical twists at the end, both from 2022. There's Spirited, the Ryan Reynolds, Will Ferrell one on Apple TV Plus, and there's Scrooge: A Christmas Carol. As we said, that's the animated loose remake of the 1970 Albert Finney musical with the
Okay,
sci-fi
if it
twist, and
doesn't
that's
have
on
"Thank You Very
Netflix.
Much" in it, I riot.
It better have "Thank You Very Much" in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are you most looking forward to? What do you like best of what you've seen, and what are you most looking forward to watching?
I mean, how can you resist a Hallmark movie called It's Christmas Carol with Carrie Fisher? I mean, what more can you possibly need? Um, I, I, I've never seen the Flintstones
Okay,
Christmas Carol, so that will be interesting.
I just rewatched it today.
Okay,
I actually enjoyed it more watching it right after Scrooged because it has some of the similar things, but I think it handles it much better.
yeah, I think we both got a lot to say about Scrooge. I watched
Mm.
that this afternoon, the afternoon we're recording this episode, and yet I have many thoughts. Most of them, it has to be said, unkind. Um,
Yeah, and I'm enjoying rewatching Spirited, but I'm really curious about this Scrooge: A Christmas Carol animated sci-fi Albert Finney remake musical, whatever. I'm
yeah,
just very curious, and I'm also looking forward to a lot of people like A Diva's Christmas Carol is the classic Hallmark, but good Hallmark movie. Apparently, I haven't watched it yet,
okay.
so I'm excited. Yeah.
It's gonna have to go some to beat It's Christmas Carol.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've already agreed we're doing another round next year. So, listeners, if we aren't covering your favorite, then please let us know. You'll find links in the show notes to our email, Discord, and Blue Sky, plus links to the Supercast and Patreon book club if you're interested in that novella deep dive and an extra short story. Not to mention last year's coverage of The Greatest Gift, which is a story our public Christmas special of last year, It's a Wonderful Life, was based on. And there's also similar Spooktober specials and breakdowns of Silo and other Hugh Howey and Dune books and the weekly Silo spoiler casts. That's all in the Supercast and Patreon. If none of that's for you, that's great. We're just glad you're here. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this, please do pass it on. And we also love to hear your feedback as well. And do also check out the cheesy Netflix Christmas coverage going on in the Lorehounds feed as well. And of course, the weekly Dune Prophecy breakdowns over there, as well as other affiliates like my own, the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast, Never Mind the Music, Radioactive Ramblings, and Properly Howard are all currently putting out new episodes. Any final thoughts, Luke?
No, I think that's it.
All right. See you soon for verse 1, the twists. But first, more silo breakdowns. Until then, May you ever be haunted by Dickens' description of the ghost of Christmas past.
On behalf of all the people who have assembled here, I would merely like to mention, if I may, that our unanimous attitude is one of lasting gratitude for what our friend has done for us today. And therefore, I would simply like to say, thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's the nicest thing that anyone's ever done for me. I may sound double Dutch, but my delight is such. I feel as if a losing war's been won for me. And if I had a flag, I'd hang me flag out to add a sort of final victory touch. But since I left me flag at home, I'll simply have to say thank you very, very, very